It's been almost 20 years since it happened, and even now, just talking about it makes the hairs on my arms stand up. Most people wouldn't believe a word of it, and for a long time I tried not to either. But some things stick with you, burrow deep into your bones, and refuse to let go. This is one of those things. It's the story of the summer I learned that some fields hold more than just grass and wildflowers. Some fields hold other things. I was 21 that summer, a fresh college graduate brimming with that particular brand of youthful overconfidence. I'd landed a job as a junior field researcher for a small environmental consulting firm. Basically, I was the grunt, the one they sent out to collect soil samples, map plant populations, and generally do the dirty work. It was supposed to be a stepping stone, a way to pay off student loans while I figured out my grand career plan. Looking back, I can see how naive I was, how utterly unprepared for anything beyond textbook problems and office politics. My assignment was out in the foothills, a forgotten stretch of land that was slated for a new solar farm. Before they could break ground, we had to conduct an ecological survey, making sure no protected species or ancient Native American burial sites were going to be disturbed. It was remote, even for that area. The nearest town was a good 45 minutes drive, mostly on unpaved roads. The cell service was spotty at best, and the only other living things I usually encountered were deer, coyotes, and the occasional grumpy badger. Perfect isolation for someone who loved peace and quiet and felt invincible. I'd been out there for weeks mapping and cataloging. I knew the land like the back of my hand, or so I thought. The field in question was a wide, gently sloping expanse, bordered on one side by a dense thicket of scrub oak and on the other by a slow-moving creek. In the middle, it was just tall, goldenrod and wild grasses swaying in the breeze. It was beautiful, especially in the late afternoon when the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and soft purples. That particular day, my goal was to finish a grid section of soil samples near the western edge of the field, close to the scrub oak. I remember thinking I was cutting it a little close with the daylight. My internal clock was always a bit off, especially when I got focused. I told myself I'd pack up by 6 p.m., giving me enough time to drive back to the dilapidated cabin I was renting before it got truly dark. But 6 p.m. came and went, and then 6:30, and I was still digging, humming some forgettable tune to myself. The air was growing cooler, the golden light softening, stretching long shadows across the landscape. That was my first mistake, of course, staying out too late, pushing the boundaries of daylight in a place where artificial light was a distant memory. It was just an hour, maybe a little more, past when I should have been heading for the truck. No big deal, I reasoned at the time. I knew the way. What could happen? I packed up my tools, wiped the sweat from my brow with the back of a gloved hand, and slung my backpack over my shoulder. As I turned to walk towards my beat-up Ford Ranger, which was parked about a quarter-mile away on a dirt track, I paused. The sun was dipping below the horizon now, a fiery sliver on the distant hills. The entire field was bathed in that magnificent, fleeting twilight, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't a sound or a smell or even a sudden movement. It was something far more subtle, a quiet disruption of the natural order that at first I dismissed as an optical illusion. My own shadow, stretched long and thin by the setting sun, lay on the ground before me, but there was another shadow just ahead of it near the edge of the scrub oak. It was roughly human-shaped, long and indistinct, like a smudge of charcoal on the golden grass. The problem, there was no one there to cast it. No tree, no rock, no person. And then as I watched, my heart gave a tiny, involuntary lurch. That shadow, the one that shouldn't have been there, seemed to shift. It elongated, then contracted, not with the natural movement of a shadow following its source, but with a slight, almost imperceptible drift across the field, away from the very bushes that might have barely caught the light. It was just a flicker, a whisper of movement, but it was enough. The vast, silent field suddenly felt like it was holding its breath. My breath hitched, the quiet stillness of the field, which I usually found so comforting, now pressed in on me, suffocating. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, telling myself it was a trick of the light, the setting sun playing games with my tired eyes. But the shadow was still there, a long, dark smear against the amber grass, and it was no longer drifting. It was still, motionless, waiting. My mind, usually so quick to analyze and categorize, struggled to make sense of it. Shadows needed a source. Everything I knew about physics, about light and optics, screamed that this was impossible. Yet there it was, an anomaly painted onto the landscape. It wasn't quite human, not quite animal. More like an impression, a placeholder for a form that hadn't fully materialized, or perhaps hadn't fully chosen to materialize. A chill, unrelated to the cooling air, snaked up my spine. My initial reaction was a surge of adrenaline, a primal fight-or-flight response. But fight what? A shadow. It felt absurd even to me. So I froze, my body rigid, my eyes glued to the dark shape. I tried to discern any detail, any hint of what it could be. Was it a peculiar bush I hadn't noticed? A trick of the terrain? I knew this field. I had mapped every square meter of this section, dug countless holes. There was nothing there that could cast a shadow like that, especially not one that had seemed to move independently. The sun had almost vanished now, leaving behind a bruised purple sky at the horizon. The field was losing its vibrant colors, softening into muted grays and indigos. In this deepening gloom, the shadow seemed to gain substance, its edges hardening, its form becoming more defined, though still vague. It was tall, too tall to be a person, maybe 8 or 9 feet, and unnervingly thin. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding reedy and pathetic in the vast silence. It was a stupid thing to do, I knew, but a desperate attempt to break the spell, to force a rational explanation into existence. Perhaps a local hiker, someone I hadn't seen before, had wandered off the trails. But hikers didn't stand perfectly still for minutes on end, blending into the twilight, casting impossible shadows. No answer, only the gentle rustle of the evening breeze through the tall grasses, a sound that now seemed sinister, like whispering voices. My hand instinctively went to the small, heavy rock hammer tucked into a loop on my belt. It was a useless weapon against whatever this was, but the feel of its cold steel was a small comfort. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to sprint for my truck, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the shadow. It felt like if I looked away, even for a second, it would be gone, or worse, it would be closer. And then it moved again, not a drift this time. It was a deliberate, fluid motion. The shadow seemed to stretch, growing longer and thinner, reaching out like an arm towards me. It was too fast for a real shadow, too purposeful. It was like watching ink bleed across a canvas, only the canvas was the very ground beneath my feet. A cold dread seeped into my bones, a kind of fear I had never known. This wasn't an animal, or a person, or a trick of light. This was other. My paralysis broke. With a gasp, I spun on my heel, my heart hammering against my ribs, a drumbeat of terror. I didn't look back, I just ran. The quarter-mile to my truck, which had seemed a negligible distance just moments before, now stretched into an endless marathon. The ground, usually familiar, felt uneven and treacherous beneath my boots. Every rustle of grass, every snap of a twig sounded like footsteps behind me. My backpack bounced painfully against my back, my soil samples and tools becoming a heavy burden. I stumbled, nearly falling, but somehow kept my footing, driven by a raw, unthinking panic. The twilight was deepening rapidly, the last vestiges of light fading from the sky. The field was a blur of dark shapes and menacing shadows. I could feel it, the presence behind me, though I dared not look. It was a cold pressure, a sense of being observed, hunted. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I pushed harder, forcing air in and out in ragged gasps. Finally, the faint outline of my beat-up Ford Ranger appeared ahead. a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. I fumbled for my keys as I ran, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped them. The truck, usually a reliable workhorse, suddenly seemed impossibly far away, an illusion that might vanish before I reached it. I burst through the last clump of tall grass, practically vaulting into the driver's seat. My hands were slick with sweat as I jammed the key into the ignition. It turned with a familiar click, but the engine only coughed once, then died. My heart plummeted. No, 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 I whimpered, frantically trying again. Another cough, another dying wheeze. The truck, which had started perfectly fine just an hour ago, was refusing to cooperate. It felt deliberate, like some cruel cosmic joke. I slammed my fist on the steering wheel, hot tears pricking at my eyes. Through the windshield, the field was now a uniform expanse of deep gray. The scrub oak was a black smudge against the horizon, and then I saw it, a movement, a ripple in the darkness, further out than before, but unmistakably drawing closer. The shadow. It was moving with an impossible speed, flowing over the uneven ground, not walking, not running, but simply gliding. Terror spurred me on. I cranked the ignition again, holding the key down, pumping the gas pedal. The engine sputtered, caught, and then roared to life, shaking the old truck. I didn't even put it in gear, just slammed my foot on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning on the loose dirt before finding purchase. I shifted into reverse, then drive, my movements clumsy and panicked. I tore down the dirt track, dust billowing behind me. I risked a glance in the rearview mirror, nothing but swirling dust and the rapidly fading landscape. Had it been there? Was it still there? Or was it just my mind playing tricks? I didn't care. I just needed to get away. The drive back to the cabin was a blur. Every shadow cast by the headlights seemed to shift. Every tree trunk momentarily resembled a tall, thin figure. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The familiar 45-minute drive felt like an eternity. I kept telling myself it was over, that whatever I saw was confined to that field, to that moment. But the cold dread that had taken root in my chest refused to subside. The cabin, a rustic, two-room shack I'd rented for the summer, appeared suddenly in my headlights. It was basic, with no internet and minimal electricity, but it was my space, my haven. Tonight it felt like a fragile shell. I pulled up close to the porch, killed the engine, and didn't even bother turning off the lights. I scrambled out, fumbling with the cabin keys, my hands still shaking uncontrollably. The lock clicked open, and I practically fell inside, slamming the heavy wooden door shut behind me. I leaned against it, gasping for breath, my chest heaving. The cabin was dark, stuffy, and silent. I fumbled for the light switch, flipping it up. A single dim bulb in the ceiling flickered to life, casting long, distorted shadows around the small living room. I felt safer marginally, but the image of that impossible shadow, stretching and moving with an eerie purpose, was burned into my mind. I walked over to the small, grimy window that overlooked the dirt track and the surrounding sparse woods. I peered out, my breath fogging the glass. Nothing. Just the impenetrable darkness of the rural night, punctuated by the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. I told myself it was my imagination, tiredness, overwork, the isolation getting to me. I was a scientist, for crying out loud. I dealt in facts and observable phenomena. Shadows didn't move on their own. Things didn't just appear. It had to be a trick of perception, a moment of acute stress causing me to misinterpret something benign. A bird, a deer, the wind rustling a tattered flag. Anything but what I thought I saw. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. I locked the door again, then checked the windows, making sure they were latched tight. It felt foolish, like I was preparing for a siege, but I couldn't help it. I even pulled the thin curtains, blocking out the blackness outside. I spent the next few hours pacing, trying to calm myself down. I made myself a cup of instant coffee, but my hands were shaking too much to hold the mug steady. I tried to read, but the words blurred on the page. Every creak of the old cabin, every gust of wind against the walls made me jump. I kept replaying the scene in my head, searching for a logical explanation for a detail I might have missed. But there was nothing, just the impossible shadow. Eventually, exhausted but wired, I collapsed onto the narrow bed. I pulled the rough blanket up to my chin, but sleep was a distant luxury. My mind raced, conjuring images of the shadow, closer now, its form coalescing into something monstrous. I imagined it outside, just beyond the thin wooden walls, waiting. I must have drifted off eventually because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by a sound. Not a loud sound, but a distinct one. A scraping, like something dragging against the side of the cabin right outside my window. My eyes snapped open. The room was dark save for the faint glow of the digital clock on my phone, 3:17 a.m. I held my breath, listening. The scraping sound came again, a slow, deliberate shake. It was low, rhythmic, almost like a giant fingernail dragging across wood. My heart began to pound again, mimicking the frantic rhythm of my escape from the field. I slowly, carefully pushed myself up, straining my ears. The sound was coming from the wall next to my bed, the one with the window. I remembered pulling the curtains. I remembered locking the window. But the sound was undeniably there, intimate and terrifyingly close. It wasn't the wind or an animal. It was too regular, too intentional. It felt like something was testing the boundary, seeing if it could get in. My mind screamed at me to stay still, to pretend I was asleep, to make no sound. But an irrational compulsion, a morbid curiosity mixed with sheer terror, forced me to move. I slid silently off the bed, my bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor. I crept towards the window, my eyes wide, peering through the gap in the curtains. The night outside was black as pitch. I couldn't see anything. But the scraping continued, closer now, emanating from just below the windowsill. I could almost feel the vibrations through the wall. It was a physical presence. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come out. I was trapped, alone, and whatever I had encountered in the field seemed to have followed me home. This wasn't just an optical illusion anymore. This was real. A new sound joined the scraping, a faint, almost imperceptible tap, tap, tap. It was lighter, more delicate, like fingers gently drumming on the glass of the window just above where the curtains were drawn. My blood ran cold, my entire body seized up. Something was at the window, something was touching the glass. I could feel its presence, a cold, empty void just outside, radiating a profound, unnatural chill that seemed to seep through the pane. I backed away slowly, carefully, until my back hit the opposite wall. My eyes were fixed on the window, though I couldn't see anything. I could only feel it. The faint tapping continued for a few more agonizing seconds, then stopped. The scraping stopped too. The cabin was plunged back into a terrifying silence, broken only by the frantic drumming of my own heart. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, listening, waiting, nothing. The silence was absolute, a heavy blanket that smothered every other sound. Had it gone, was it still there, just waiting? I couldn't stay in the cabin. The thought was immediate, overriding every other fear. I had to get out. But where? The nearest town was 45 minutes away. And what if it was out there, waiting? I spent the rest of the night huddled in the corner of the living room, a cheap plastic flashlight clutched in my hand, pointing it at the door and windows like a useless weapon. I must have dozed off again because the next time I truly became aware, weak gray light was filtering through the gaps in the curtains. Dawn. My body ached, my eyes were gritty and red, but the terror of the night was replaced by a grim determination. I couldn't stay here, not without answers. I couldn't just abandon my job either. This was my first real gig, my stepping stone, but more importantly, a powerful, almost magnetic pull drew me back to that field. I had to know. I had to understand what I had seen, what had followed me. I crept to the window slowly, cautiously, pulling back the curtain just a sliver. The world outside was bathed in the soft, forgiving light of early morning. Birds were chirping. The air was cool and fresh. Everything looked utterly normal, utterly benign. The scraping and tapping of the night seemed like a horrific dream. I ventured outside, walking around the perimeter of the cabin. My eyes scanned the ground, the walls, the windows, nothing. No footprints, no marks on the wood, no smudges on the glass. The old cabin stood silent, innocent, as if nothing untoward had ever happened. It was almost more unsettling than finding evidence. It made me question my own sanity. Had I really heard those sounds, or was my exhausted, terrified mind conjuring them? But I couldn't shake the deep-seated conviction that it had been real. The cold, the sense of presence, that wasn't a dream. I drove back to the field that morning, a heavy sense of dread settling in my gut with every turn of the wheel. The sun was up, bright and reassuring. The landscape, which had been so menacing in the twilight, now seemed bathed in an almost idyllic glow. The goldenrod swayed gently in the breeze, bees buzzed amongst the wildflowers. It was a beautiful, ordinary day. I parked my truck in the same spot, gathered my equipment, and forced myself out. My steps were hesitant as I approached the area where I had seen the shadow. Every rustle of grass made me flinch. I felt exposed, vulnerable, despite the broad daylight. I reached the spot. The ground was just as it had been. Tall grasses, the occasional rock, scattered wildflowers, nothing unusual. I walked towards the scrub oak, peering into the dense thicket. No hidden crevices, no unusual rock formations, no giant discarded tarps. Nothing that could account for an 8-foot-tall, independently moving shadow. I spent the next hour meticulously examining the area, walking grid patterns, my eyes scanning every inch of ground. I was looking for anything, a disturbance, a footprint, a patch of scorched earth, a broken branch, anything, but there was nothing. The field looked exactly as it always had, innocent, empty. The lack of any physical evidence was profoundly disturbing. It felt like the land itself was mocking me, erasing its own secrets. If I hadn't felt the terror, if I hadn't heard the sounds at my cabin, I would have dismissed the whole thing as a delusion. But I knew what I had seen. I sat down on a fallen log near the edge of the field, pulling out my water bottle. My logical brain was screaming for an explanation, for a way to fit this into the known parameters of the world. Maybe a hallucination caused by dehydration or exhaustion, but I felt perfectly lucid now, just deeply shaken. What if it wasn't a shadow? What if it was something else that manifested as a shadow? A creature that existed between dimensions or on a different plane of existence, only partially visible. The idea was outlandish, something out of a horror movie, not the reality of a field researcher. But what else could explain it? I pulled out my phone, still no service. I felt the familiar pang of isolation. There was no one to call, no one to tell. My boss would think I was crazy. My friends would laugh. My family would demand I come home. I was on my own. I decided to try a different approach. If I couldn't find physical evidence, maybe I could find historical context. I knew from my initial background research that this area had some scattered Native American history, mostly small, seasonal camps, but nothing extensive. There were no official burial grounds mapped in the immediate vicinity of this field, which was why my company was confident about the solar farm project. But what if they had missed something? What if there were local legends, forgotten stories passed down through generations? I packed up my gear, feeling a renewed, albeit terrifying, purpose. I would drive to the nearest town, the tiny speck on the map called Harmony Creek. It was small, isolated, and probably full of old-timers who knew every rock and every whisper of the wind. Maybe someone there had heard anything about this particular field. The drive to Harmony Creek was just as dusty and long as usual. The town itself was little more than a main street with a general store, a post office, a gas station, and a diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1950s. I parked my truck and walked towards the general store. It seemed like the most likely place to start, a hub of local gossip and information. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of dust, old wood, and something vaguely like stale coffee. An elderly woman with a severe bun and spectacles perched on her nose was behind the counter, polishing a jar of pickled eggs. "Morning," she said, her voice raspy. She looked me over, clearly recognizing me as an outsider, but with a flicker of curiosity rather than suspicion. I had been in the store a few times before, restocking supplies. "Good morning," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Mildred, isn't it?" "That's right, dear. What can I get for you today?" "Actually, Mildred, I was hoping you could help me with something a little unusual." I paused, trying to figure out how to phrase my question without sounding completely insane. I'm still out there at the old Miller property doing the environmental survey. She nodded, a knowing look on her face. "Ah, the solar farm folks. Heard y'all were poking around out there." "That's right, I was just wondering, do you know much about the history of that specific piece of land, the big field near the scrub oak by the creek?" I tried to keep my voice even, but I could feel the tremor of anxiety beneath it. Mildred's expression shifted. Her eyes, which had been kindly, narrowed slightly. She stopped polishing the jar. "That field," she asked slowly, her voice lower now, "ain't much to tell, just empty land, always has been." Her tone, however, suggested otherwise. It was a dismissive answer, but the dismissiveness felt like a shield. "Oh," I said, trying to push. "I just thought, with all the old stories in these parts. Any old legends about that specific area, anything unusual ever happen out there?" Mildred picked up a rag and began wiping down the counter, her movements deliberate. She wouldn't meet my gaze. "Folks don't go out there much anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not since the Miller boy." My ears perked up. "The Miller boy, what happened?" She sighed, a long, weary sound. "It was a long time ago, before your time, certainly. Little Jimmy Miller must have been about 8 or 9, just disappeared. One evening, playing out in that field, never found a trace." A cold prickle ran down my arms. Disappeared, like ran away. Mildred shook her head. "Jimmy wasn't the type. Good boy, his folks searched for weeks. Sheriff too, nothing, just gone, like the land swallowed him whole." She finally looked at me, her eyes dark and serious. "His mama, bless her heart, always said the field took him, said there was something out there." Something what? I prompted, my voice barely audible. She wrung out her rag. She never said, just that feeling, that quiet. Folks used to say that field was empty, but not empty like an empty room, you understand. Empty like something hollowed it out, like it was always waiting to be filled. My stomach churned. This was unsettlingly close to my own perception of the field. Have there been other disappearances, other incidents? Mildred hesitated, then lowered her voice even further. After Jimmy, people just stayed away. Farm animals would wander and sometimes get lost, come back spooked or not at all. A few hikers passing through claimed they felt watched, heard things, but nothing concrete, nothing like Jimmy. She leaned in slightly. What did you see out there, dear? You look a bit pale. I couldn't tell her, not all of it, just a strange light in the twilight. It spooked me. It was a half-truth, but one I hoped sounded more rational. She seemed to accept it, or at least didn't press. That field, she murmured, more to herself than to me. Best to leave it be. Some places just don't want to be disturbed. I thanked Mildred, bought a few things I didn't need, and left the store, my mind reeling. Jimmy Miller, gone without a trace. The field took him. The words echoed in my head, chilling me to the core. This wasn't just my imagination. This place had a history, a sinister one. My next stop was the town's tiny library, a dusty building tucked away behind the post office. It was mostly children's books and romance novels, but I hoped to find some local historical records, old newspapers, anything about the Miller family or the land. The librarian, a perpetually cheerful woman named Carol, greeted me warmly. She knew me from my earlier visits when I'd been more concerned with finding good hiking maps than local lore. Anything I can help you with, dear? She asked, her smile wide. Hi, Carol. I'm actually looking for something a bit specific today. Do you have any old newspaper archives or local history books that might mention the Miller property, or perhaps any disappearances in the area decades ago? Carol's smile faltered slightly. Disappearances, she repeated, her brow furrowing. Well, there was the Miller boy, of course. Poor thing, that was a tragedy. Why do you ask? I heard a local mentioned it, I lied smoothly. I'm just trying to get a full ecological picture of the land, including its human history. Any details you might have, any old articles, would be really helpful. Carol brightened. Of course, let me see. I remember we had some microfiche of the old Harmony Creek Gazette. Might take a while to dig them out. She led me to a back room, a small, dusty space filled with forgotten filing cabinets and a bulky microfiche reader. She showed me how to operate it, then left me to it, promising to check on me in a bit. I started sifting through the years, scrolling through blurry headlines and grainy photographs. It was tedious work, but the story of Jimmy Miller hung heavy in the air, fueling my search. Finally, after what felt like hours, I found it. A small article from nearly 20 years ago, tucked away on an inside page. Local boy vanishes in foothills field. The headline was understated, almost mundane, but the accompanying article filled in the horrifying blanks. James Jimmy Miller 8 had been playing in a field bordering his family's property, collecting wildflowers for his mother when he disappeared. Search parties had been organized, involving local law enforcement, volunteers, and even bloodhounds. They searched for weeks, but found no trace of the boy. Not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, nothing. The article ended with a quote from his distraught father, speculating that Jimmy might have wandered off and fallen into the creek, But even that felt like a desperate attempt at rationalization. The creek, after all, was shallow and slow-moving. Further down, another brief article, published a month later, confirmed the search had been officially called off. Jimmy Miller was presumed dead. No body, no evidence, just an empty field and a missing child. I scrolled through the subsequent years, searching for any follow-up, any new leads. Nothing. It was as if the town had simply absorbed the loss, the mystery, into the quiet fabric of its existence. But the articles did confirm one crucial detail: the location. The field was indeed the same one I was surveying. The Miller property was the old name for the land now slated for the solar farm. My hands trembled as I scrolled through a few more years just in case. And then I saw it. Another, much smaller article, almost an afterthought from a few years after Jimmy's disappearance. Unexplained livestock losses continue. The article mentioned a local farmer, Mr. Silas Thorne, reporting multiple sheep and a prize bull missing from his pasture, bordering the same Miller property field. The losses were attributed to coyotes or other predators, but Mr. Thorne was quoted as saying, "Coyotes don't take a bull without leaving a trace. There's something else out there, something unnatural." The article dismissed his claims as local superstition, but his words resonated with a cold certainty. I felt a fresh wave of dread wash over me. Livestock losses, and Jimmy Miller, 2 decades apart yet linked by the same field, the same unsettling phenomenon. And now me, the shadow, the sounds at my cabin. This wasn't just a ghost story or a local legend. This was a pattern. This field wasn't empty. It was hungry. I printed out the articles, the blurry text a testament to the chilling reality I was facing. I thanked Carol and left the library, the sunshine outside doing little to dispel the gloom that had settled deep within me. I drove back to my cabin, the road feeling even longer, even more isolated. The thought of going back to the field filled me with an intense fear, but also a growing sense of responsibility. I couldn't just leave, not now that I knew, and I couldn't just continue my survey, pretending everything was normal. Back at the cabin, I spread the printed articles on my small table. I traced the faint lines of the old newspaper print, reading and rereading the words. The Miller boy, livestock losses, and my own encounter. What was in that field? My scientific training screamed for more data. But what kind of data could I collect on an entity that manifested as a shadow and left no physical trace? My instruments, soil auger, GPS, plant identification guide, were useless against this. I sat there for a long time, the cabin silent around me, the weight of my discovery pressing down. I was a rational person, but I was facing something profoundly irrational, and it had followed me. The memory of the scraping and tapping at my window made my skin crawl. It was out there, waiting. I knew I needed to go back to the field, not for my job, but for answers, for self-preservation. I couldn't just walk away and let this place continue its silent, sinister work. I had been foolish, reckless, staying out late, but now I had a choice, flee or confront it, and a stubborn part of me, the part that had chosen a life of exploration and discovery, refused to flee. But I wouldn't go unprepared. This time I needed to understand, I needed to observe, and I needed to protect myself. I spent the rest of the day planning. I had a few basic tools: a large, bright flashlight, spare batteries, my rock hammer, a hunting knife I kept for emergencies. It felt inadequate, ridiculously so, but it was all I had. I also had my phone, though it had no signal. It could still record video, still take pictures. Maybe, just maybe, I could capture something, get some proof. I knew deep down that going back into that field at twilight was the most dangerous thing I could do. But it was also when the shadow had appeared before. It was when it seemed to be active. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky with the same fiery hues as the previous evening, my apprehension grew into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I packed a small bag, flashlight, knife, phone, water, a warm jacket. I checked the truck's gas tank. Full. I stood by the cabin door, hand on the knob, watching the light fade. The air outside was growing cooler, the shadows lengthening, creeping across the ground like fingers. Every instinct screamed at me to stay inside, to lock the door, to wait for morning. But another, stronger impulse, born of fear and a desperate need for understanding, propelled me forward. I had to go back. I got into the truck, the engine turning over with a reassuring roar. I drove slowly this time, observing the landscape, searching for any unusual signs. The field appeared ahead, a vast expanse of golden grasses, still bathed in the last glorious rays of the setting sun. From this distance, it looked serene, beautiful, utterly harmless. A perfect trap. I parked the truck in the same spot, leaving the engine running just in case. I took a deep breath, pushing down the rising tide of panic. My hands were clammy, my mouth dry. I gripped the flashlight tightly, its cold metal a small anchor in the storm of my fear. I walked into the field, moving cautiously, my eyes scanning the horizon, the scrub oak, the very ground beneath my feet. The sun was almost gone now, a sliver of fire on the distant hills. The light was fading fast, and with it, the reassuring familiarity of the landscape. I went straight to the spot where I had first seen the shadow. The grass was tall here, swaying gently. I stood there, absolutely still, waiting, listening. The only sounds were the distant chirping of crickets and the gentle rustle of the wind. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The last light bled from the sky, leaving behind a deep indigo. The field was becoming a canvas of shades of gray and black. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drum. And then I saw it. It appeared slowly, subtly, like ink dissolving into water. Not sudden, not jarring, just a darkening of the air, a concentration of shadow where there should have been none. It was in the same general area as before, near the scrub oak, perhaps 50 yards away. It wasn't fully formed yet, just a vague, elongated smudge against the deepening gloom. I immediately raised my phone, fumbling with the camera. The screen was too dark, the image too faint. I tried to adjust the settings, but my hands were shaking too much. I cursed under my breath. The shadow was solidifying, growing taller, thinner. It was like watching a void condense, pulling the light out of the air around it. It wasn't just a projection of an unseen object. It was the object composed entirely of absence. I clicked on the flashlight, its powerful beam cutting through the gloom. I aimed it directly at the shadow. The beam passed straight through it. It was like shining a light on smoke or a hole in the air. The shadow absorbed the light, didn't reflect it, didn't scatter it. It just wasn't there in the traditional sense, even as it clearly was there. This confirmation, this undeniable impossibility, sent a fresh wave of terror through me. My scientific brain struggled to comprehend. It defied everything. It was a dark, living anomaly. The shadow began to move. Slowly at first, a deliberate, gliding motion coming towards me. It didn't walk. It didn't run. It simply flowed like a dark current over the uneven ground, unimpeded by the tall grass or the small dips in the terrain. Its movement was eerily silent, making no sound whatsoever. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to run, but this time I forced myself to stay. I had come for answers. I had come to observe. I had to face it. The shadow grew taller as it approached, stretching upwards, its form becoming more defined, yet still indistinct. It was like a column of pure night, a slender, towering figure with no discernible features, no head, no limbs, just a terrifyingly coherent outline of something impossibly tall and thin. It stopped about 20 feet away. The air around it felt colder, a tangible chill that seemed to radiate from its silent form. I could hear my own ragged breathing, loud in the absolute stillness. My flashlight beam still passed through it, illuminating the grass behind it. Yet the shadow remained, an unholy blotch against the fading light. It was physically present, yet immaterial. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the impossible. I was breathing shallowly, my lungs burning. The cold radiating from the shadow intensified, seeping into my very bones. It wasn't just atmospheric. It felt like a cold dread, a profound chill of the soul. I wanted to speak, to call out again, but my throat was constricted. What would I even say? What are you? Why are you here? It felt ridiculous, facing down an ethereal entity with a flashlight and a hunting knife. The shadow, that tall, impossibly thin column of darkness, did not move closer, but it changed. Its edges, previously somewhat blurred, sharpened. Its form seemed to grow denser, more substantial, even as the light passed through it. And then from somewhere within its black depths, a new sensation emerged. It wasn't a sound, not really, but a pressure. A silent hum that resonated in my chest, a low, pulsing thrum that felt like a question or an accusation. It wasn't aggressive, not yet, but profoundly unsettling. It felt ancient, vast, and utterly indifferent to my presence, yet focused solely on me. This wasn't a trick of the light. This was a direct encounter. My hands, still gripping the flashlight, began to shake violently. I took a step back, then another. The hum seemed to grow stronger, vibrating through the soles of my boots. It felt like a subtle invasion, a soft, silent probe into my very being. This wasn't just a shadow, it was a consciousness, a presence that was aware, that was observing me in return. I couldn't stand it. The pressure was becoming unbearable, a silent scream inside my head. All my scientific resolve, my desperate need for answers, crumbled in the face of this profound, alien presence. This wasn't something to be studied from a distance. This was something that consumed. With a choked cry, I broke. I spun around, abandoning all pretense of observation, and ran. This time, the run felt different. The first time had been pure, unthinking panic. This time, it was an abject terror mixed with a crushing sense of defeat. I had tried to be brave, to understand, and it had responded with something far more terrifying than a growl or a charge. It had responded with a silent, internal invasion, a chilling intellectual dominance that made my own mind feel small and insignificant. I didn't risk a glance back. Every muscle screamed in protest, my lungs burning as I pushed myself to my absolute limit. The ground was a treacherous blur beneath my feet in the deep twilight. The hum, that silent, resonant thrum, seemed to follow me, vibrating in my teeth, in my skull, a relentless, pervasive presence that refused to be left behind. The truck, it was my only hope. I could see its dark outline now, a dim, square shape against the last vestiges of light on the horizon. I ran harder, desperately, praying the engine was still running, praying it would take me away, just like before. I reached the truck, throwing myself inside, slamming the door shut. The engine was indeed still idling, a sweet mechanical purr. I slammed the shifter into reverse, then drive, not bothering to put on the seatbelt, not even looking behind me. The tires spun, showering dirt behind them, and then the truck lurched forward, tearing down the dirt track. I didn't stop until I reached the main, paved road, a good 10 miles away from the field. Only then did I dare to look in the rearview mirror. Nothing but the endless, dark road behind me. The hum had finally faded, or perhaps it was just my own frantic heartbeat drowning it out. My entire body trembled, a full-body seizure of raw, undiluted fear. I drove all the way back to the cabin, pushing the truck past its limits, the 45-minute journey feeling like an hour. The darkness outside was absolute, pressing in on all sides. Every shadow cast by my headlights, every rustle of leaves brought back the image of that gliding column of night. When I finally pulled up to the cabin, I didn't get out immediately. I sat there, engine idling, the interior of the truck feeling like the only safe space in the world. My breath came in ragged gasps. I put my head on the steering wheel, trying to calm the frantic beating of my heart. The cold dread had returned, a heavy weight in my chest. I knew I couldn't stay in the cabin, not anymore, not after what I had felt, what I had encountered. It wasn't just a physical threat, it was a mental one, an entity that could touch my mind. The cabin felt porous, insufficient. But where could I go? Harmony Creek was small, isolated. My company's main office was hundreds of miles away. My family and friends were even further. And who would believe me? I was a lone researcher talking about sentient shadows and psychic hums. I eventually forced myself out of the truck, keys fumbling in my shaking hand. I went through the motions, locking the door, pulling the curtains, but it felt futile. The cabin was a sieve, and whatever was out there, it had already found me once. I didn't sleep that night. I packed. I gathered everything I considered essential, throwing it into my largest duffel bag. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, my phone, the rock hammer, the hunting knife, extra batteries, a small first aid kit. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. As dawn approached, painting the sky with weak, anemic light, I made my decision. I would drive to the nearest major town, Oakwood, about 2 hours away. It was big enough to have a motel, some kind of internet access, and maybe even a police station that would take a report seriously, even if they couldn't help. It was a step, any step, away from the immediate threat. I left the cabin in a hurry, not bothering to clean up or formally check out. My contract could be terminated, my job could be lost. None of that mattered anymore. All that mattered was getting away and trying to figure out what the hell was happening. The drive to Oakwood was long and silent. My mind raced, trying to process everything. The shadow, the disappearances, the silent hum, it was all real, it was happening, and I was in the middle of it. Oakwood was a bustling town, a welcome change from the oppressive quiet of the foothills. I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts, a place with flickering neon signs and a faint smell of disinfectant. The anonymity, the background noise of traffic and distant sirens was strangely comforting. First order of business, contact. My phone finally had signal. I called my boss, David Chen, at the environmental consulting firm. He was a gruff but fair man, an old-school geologist who'd seen it all, or so he thought. Chen here, his voice boomed through the phone. David, it's my name. I need to report something. I've had to leave the field. There was a pause. Leave the field. What happened? Are you all right? Did you get all the samples? His tone was a mix of concern for me and irritation at potential delays. I'm fine mostly, but no, I haven't gotten all the samples and I can't go back there, not to that field. I chose my words carefully, trying to sound rational. There's something unusual happening out there, something that makes the site unsuitable for the solar farm or any human presence. Unusual? What are you talking about? Did you find protected species? A major archaeological site? He asked, his voice tightening. These were legitimate reasons to halt a project, but not what I was dealing with. No, David, it's harder to explain. I saw something, and it followed me. I took a deep breath. It was like a shadow, but it moved on its own. It was tall, impossibly thin. It radiated cold, and last night it was at my cabin window, trying to get in. The silence, a long, heavy silence, stretched between us. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, assessing my mental state. Listen, my name, David finally said, his voice slow and deliberate. I know this job can be isolating. You've been out there for weeks. Are you sure you're not just experiencing some stress, maybe some sleep deprivation? No, David, I'm not. I'm telling you this was real. And I went back, I saw it again last night. It's not just a visual anomaly, it's a presence. And I found out there's a history to that field. A kid disappeared there 20 years ago, completely vanished. Livestock too. Another, even longer pause. A kid disappeared, that's concerning. Did you report this to the local authorities? No, not yet. I found out from local newspaper archives. The town of Harmony Creek, Mildred at the general store and Carol at the library, they confirmed it. I knew I sounded frantic, but I couldn't help it. All right, take it easy. Where are you now? I'm in Oakwood at the Happy Trails Motel. I didn't feel safe staying at the cabin. Okay, good. Look, my name. I'm going to be frank with you. What you're describing, it sounds like you're experiencing some kind of delusion. I'm worried about you. But I also take concerns about a site seriously, especially if there's a history of disappearances, even if it's a local legend. He sounded like he was trying to choose his words carefully to be both supportive and dismissive. It's not a delusion, David, I insisted, my voice tight with frustration. It's real, and I think it's dangerous. Okay, tell you what, I'm going to drive out there tomorrow. I'll meet you at the Happy Trails first thing in the morning. We can talk in person. I'll bring some extra gear and we'll go check out this field together. I want to see for myself what's going on. A wave of relief, hot and unexpected, washed over me. He wasn't dismissing me outright. He was coming. Thank you, David, thank you. Don't thank me yet, he grumbled. This is going to set the project back and the client won't be happy. But safety first, always. And if there's really something out there, we need to know for our liability, if nothing else. His pragmatism was a familiar anchor. It wasn't belief, but it was action. It was something. I understand, I'll be here. I hung up feeling a fraction lighter. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone else was coming, someone who was grounded in reality, in science, in facts. Maybe David would see something I missed, some rational explanation for the shadow, for the hum, for everything. Or maybe, just maybe, he would see it too. The thought sent a fresh shiver down my spine. I spent the rest of the day holed up in my motel room, trying to decompress. I ate a terrible fast food burger, watched some mindless TV, and tried not to think about the field, about the shadow. But it was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that tall, impossibly thin column of darkness, felt that silent, penetrating hum. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and disturbed by vivid, terrifying dreams. Dreams of being chased through endless fields by a silent, formless presence. Dreams of being trapped in a cabin while something scraped at the walls. I woke up several times, heart pounding, convinced I could still feel the cold, hear the faint tapping. The next morning, David Chen arrived promptly at 8 a.m., his beat-up company SUV pulling into the motel parking lot. He was a stocky man in his late 50s, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and perpetually tired eyes that missed nothing. He was wearing his usual field attire, a faded khaki vest covered in pockets, sturdy boots, and a wide-brimmed hat. He strode into the motel lobby, spotted me immediately, and gave a curt nod. "Ready." "As I'll ever be," I mumbled, grabbing my duffel bag. We drove in his SUV, heading back towards the foothills, towards Harmony Creek, towards the field. The journey was mostly silent. I tried to explain everything again, more coherently this time, from the first sighting to the scraping at the cabin to the second, more intense encounter. David listened, his expression unreadable, occasionally nodding but offering no comments. He just absorbed it all, his gaze fixed on the winding road. As we neared Harmony Creek, David finally spoke. "So you're certain about this history you found, the Miller boy?" "Yes, I printed out the articles. I can show you." "Good, that's something, a verifiable fact at least. The rest, well, we'll see." His skepticism was palpable, but his willingness to see was enough. We stopped at Mildred's general store for coffee and some snacks. Mildred gave me a wary look, then greeted David with a nod of recognition. "Solar farm folks back, eh?" Still poking around the Miller place. David just grunted in response, but I could tell he was observing her, noting her tone. We drove past the cabin. I pointed it out to him. "That's where it was, at the window." He gave it a quick, professional once-over, but didn't stop. He was focused on the field. We pulled up to the dirt track leading to the field. David parked his SUV next to my Ranger. He got out, stretching, and then pulled a large, reinforced backpack from the back. It was clearly heavier and more specialized than my own gear. "All right," he said, slinging the backpack over his shoulder. "Show me." We walked towards the field, the sun high and bright overhead. It was a beautiful, peaceful day. The field looked utterly benign, golden grasses swaying gently, birds chirping, a light breeze rustling through the scrub oak. It was almost impossible to believe the terror it held. "This is it," I said, my voice hushed as we reached the general area. "Right about here." I pointed to the spot where I had last faced the shadow. David pulled out a pair of binoculars and slowly scanned the horizon, then the scrub oak, then the entire expanse of the field. He moved deliberately, professionally, taking in every detail. "Nothing obvious," he murmured. "No game trails, no signs of recent disturbance, no unusual plant growth." He then pulled out a handheld GPS unit and started taking readings, cross-referencing them with a map. "This is the proposed footprint for the main solar array," he explained, pointing to a section of the map, "right over this part of the field." He spent the next hour doing what I had done, meticulously examining the ground, looking for any physical anomaly. He had a small, portable magnetometer, a device to measure magnetic fields. He passed it slowly over the ground. Nothing. He had a small thermal imager, checking for any unusual temperature fluctuations. Still nothing. As he worked, he asked me to describe my encounters again in minute detail. I recounted everything, forcing myself to relive the fear, the cold, the silent hum. He listened, making occasional notes on a small pad. "You said it radiated cold," he asked, looking up from his notes. "Yes, a very distinct, unnatural chill, even through the wall of the cabin." "Interesting," he said, but offered no further explanation. Finally, he stood up, dusting off his pants. "All right, I've seen this area from a scientific perspective. Nothing here to suggest anything out of the ordinary, beyond what you'd expect in a remote, undeveloped field. No unusual geology, no radiation, no magnetic anomalies, no strange heat signatures." My heart sank. I knew this would happen. He wasn't going to believe me. "But I believe you saw something," he continued, catching my eye. "I don't know what and I don't know why, but you're not one to invent stories. My name and the disappearances, those are fact. The Miller boy, the livestock, that's historical data. Even if the police reports blame coyotes for the livestock, the farmer's quote suggests otherwise, and the boy a complete vanishing, that's rare." He paused, looking out over the field, his expression thoughtful. "So, if it's not physical in a way our instruments can detect, and it's not a common animal or person, then we're dealing with something else." I felt a surge of validation mixed with renewed dread. "So, you believe me?" He shrugged. "I believe your experience was real to you. And I believe there's an unexplained phenomenon here. As for what it is, that's another matter. But I'm not ruling anything out. Not when a client is paying us to give a thorough assessment, and especially not when there's a history of disappearances." He pulled out a compact, high-powered night vision scope from his bag. "We're going to observe it tonight, properly, not just you alone, both of us. And we'll set up some recording equipment." My blood ran cold. "Tonight, David, are you sure that's wise?" It felt like it was trying to get into the cabin. "We'll be careful, and we won't be in the cabin. We'll be in the SUV. We'll park closer this time, but we'll stay inside with the doors locked and the engine running. We'll have a clear line of sight. We'll set up a tripod with a camera and we'll use the night vision. Maybe we'll see what your phone couldn't capture." Despite my fear, a flicker of my scientific curiosity reignited. This was David Chen, experienced field researcher, taking this seriously. With his equipment, his expertise, maybe we could finally get some answers. "What if it comes for the truck?" I asked, the memory of the hum still fresh. "These vehicles are steel and glass," he said, tapping the side of the SUV. "Much more substantial than a wooden cabin, and we'll have the engine running. Quick escape if needed. We'll keep the high beams on, too. Maybe light will deter it, even if it passes through it." He spent the rest of the afternoon setting up. He had brought a trail camera, the kind used for wildlife observation, which could detect motion and record in infrared. He also had a more sophisticated thermal camera, designed for industrial inspections, which could pick up even subtle temperature differences. He positioned both strategically, camouflaged near the edge of the field, aimed at the area where the shadow usually appeared. He connected them wirelessly to a small monitor in the SUV, so we could observe from a distance. As the sun began its descent, the air growing cool, the field once again transforming from idyllic to ominous, my anxiety spiked. David, however, seemed calm, almost invigorated. He was in his element, solving a mystery. "Remember," he said as we settled into the SUV, positioning ourselves to see the field clearly through the windshield. "Stay absolutely quiet. Don't make any sudden movements. Let's just observe." The interior of the SUV was dark, the engine idling softly. Outside, the last light bled from the sky, painting the distant hills in shades of bruised purple and fiery orange. The field became a canvas of deepening shadows. We watched the monitor connected to the trail cameras. The images were grainy, infrared, showing the field in shades of gray and white. Nothing moved. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The crickets began their nightly chorus. An owl hooted in the distance. The world outside felt vast and empty. "There," David said, his voice a low whisper, pointing at the main screen. My eyes snapped to the monitor. On the thermal camera feed, a faint, elongated shape was appearing just at the edge of the scrub oak, right where I had seen it before. It was a patch of cold, a distinct blue-black outline against the warmer, gray tones of the grass and earth. It wasn't just an absence of light, it was an absence of heat, a literal cold spot taking shape. "Well, I'll be damned," David breathed, a rare note of genuine surprise in his voice. "You weren't kidding about the cold." We watched, mesmerized, as the cold spot solidified, growing taller, thinner. It was the shadow manifesting as a thermal anomaly. It moved slowly at first, gliding silently across the field, just as I had described. It wasn't walking, it was simply translating itself across the terrain, a column of absolute cold. "Remarkable," David whispered, adjusting a knob on the monitor. "It's absorbing heat from the environment, or perhaps it is cold, a vacuum of warmth." The shadow, that column of night and cold, stopped about 100 feet from our SUV, perfectly framed in the center of the field. It was taller tonight, perhaps 10 feet, its form more distinct, a perfect, slender rectangle against the monochrome infrared landscape. And then, just as before, it changed. From somewhere within its silent, cold form, the hum began. I felt it first, a subtle vibration in my chest, then in my teeth, in my skull. It grew, becoming a pervasive pressure, a silent internal chord that resonated deep within me. David stiffened beside me, his eyes fixed on the monitor, widened. What is that?" he whispered, his voice strained. "I can feel it, a pressure, like a low-frequency hum, but inside my head." Relief, profound and overwhelming, flooded through me. He felt it too. I wasn't crazy. "That's it," I breathed. "That's the hum. It's a presence. It feels like it's observing you, questioning." David was silent for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel. His professional composure was visibly cracking. "This is unprecedented. We're detecting it thermally and experiencing something else. It's clearly sentient, or at least reactive." The hum intensified. It felt like a probe, a silent invasion, searching, assessing. It wasn't painful, not yet, but deeply uncomfortable, violating. David started the engine, shifting the SUV into drive, slowly, cautiously. "Let's try something. I want to see how it reacts to motion, to light." He flicked on the high beams. Two powerful shafts of white light cut through the darkness, illuminating the shadow in the middle of the field. And just as before, the light passed through it, illuminating the grass behind it. The shadow remained, a hole in the light, a column of impenetrable darkness that defied every law of physics. The hum intensified sharply, becoming almost unbearable, a silent shriek inside our heads. The cold radiating from the shadow seemed to press against the windshield, chilling the very air inside the SUV. "It doesn't like the light," I gasped, clutching my head. "Or it's responding to our aggression," David corrected, his voice tight. "Let's back off." He slowly reversed the SUV, keeping the high beams on. As we retreated, the hum slowly receded, the pressure easing. The cold seemed to lessen. The shadow, that towering column of night, remained still, standing silently in the middle of the field, watching us. We continued to reverse until we were further back, closer to the main dirt track. David killed the engine again, plunging us into a tense silence, broken only by our ragged breathing. He kept the thermal camera running, recording every second. "This changes everything," David said, his voice low, filled with a new kind of respect and a profound unease. "This is beyond our scope, beyond anything I've ever encountered. An active, intelligent, non-corporeal entity that exists as a thermal anomaly and somehow influences human perception." "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He rubbed his temples. "We get more data, we observe, but we don't engage directly. And we certainly don't propose a solar farm here. This place is protected by something that doesn't want it disturbed." We stayed there for another hour, watching the shadow. It didn't move again. It just stood there, a silent sentinel, its cold presence radiating across the field. The hum remained, a distant thrum, a constant awareness that it was still there, still watching. Finally, David sighed. "We have enough. This is more than enough to halt the project and classify this site as hazardous. We need to go back to Oakwood. I need to write up a report, and I need to make some calls." We drove back to Oakwood in silence, the weight of our shared experience pressing down on us. David seemed to have aged 10 years in a single evening. The skepticism was gone, replaced by a grim, professional determination and a deep, unsettling fear. Back at the motel, David immediately set up his laptop, connecting the thermal camera. He began downloading the footage, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "This is evidence," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Undeniable evidence of something." He started writing his report, detailing everything we had seen, everything we had felt, including the historical data I had uncovered. He was meticulously careful, using scientific language, avoiding any sensationalism. He treated the shadow as an unidentified energy signature or a localized thermal perceptual anomaly, but the fear in his eyes was undeniable. "Who are you going to send this to?" I asked, watching him work. "My superiors, obviously, and legal. This is a massive liability. We can't in good conscience recommend this site for development. But beyond that, I don't know. This isn't a geological phenomenon. This isn't even a biological one. This is something else entirely. Something that perhaps the government or some specialized agency might be interested in or might already know about." The thought of government agencies of men in black suits added another layer of unease to the situation. This was getting bigger than just me and a weird field. David worked through the night, barely pausing. I tried to sleep, but the hum still resonated in my head, a phantom sensation that refused to dissipate. I kept seeing the column of darkness, the thermal cold spot standing silently in the field. By morning, David had a comprehensive report drafted, complete with the thermal footage. He had also made several calls, leaving urgent messages. He looked exhausted but determined. "I'm going to drive back to the main office today," he said, packing up his laptop. "I need to deliver this report in person, and I need to consult with some experts there. Maybe someone in the firm has encountered something similar or knows someone who has." It was a long shot, but it was his professional response. "What about me?" I asked. "You're coming with me. We'll arrange for your personal effects to be collected from the cabin later. This project is officially on hold, and for now, you're not to go near that field again. Consider yourself on leave with pay until we sort this out. I need you available for interviews for details. You're the primary witness." The idea of leaving the foothills, of putting physical distance between myself and the field, was a tremendous relief. But the thought of carrying this experience, this knowledge, with me forever was a heavy burden. We drove to the main office, a sleek, modern building in a bustling city, far removed from the quiet terror of the foothills. It felt alien, detached from the reality I had just experienced. David immediately went into a closed-door meeting with the senior partners of the firm, carrying his laptop and his grim report. I was shown to a small, temporary office, told to wait, and given a stack of paperwork to review, mundane administrative tasks that felt surreal after what I'd been through. I felt like an alien in their perfectly normal world, a normal person carrying an impossible secret. Hours later, David emerged, looking even more drained. He called me into a conference room. Two other people were there, a severe-looking woman in a tailored suit, the firm's lead counsel, and a calm, scholarly man with kind eyes, Dr. Eris Thorne, a senior geological consultant, specializing in rare earth elements and unusual subsurface phenomena. "They believe us," David said, his voice flat but with an underlying current of wonder. He looked at me, a strange mix of fear and professional satisfaction in his eyes. "They saw the footage. They felt the pressure from my description, and Dr. Thorne here has some theories." Dr. Thorne smiled, a gentle, reassuring expression. "Please call me Eris. I understand this has been a deeply unsettling experience for you. My name. David has given us a preliminary report, and the thermal footage is quite compelling." The legal counsel, Ms. Davies, cut in, her voice sharp and to the point. "For legal purposes, we are classifying this as an anomalous energy signature with potential environmental and health implications. The project is halted indefinitely. We are withdrawing our proposal and advising the client against any development on that land." That was it. The solar farm was dead. My first major project ended by an impossible shadow. Eris then leaned forward, his kind eyes serious. "Now for the scientific inquiry. What you've encountered, my name, is rare but not entirely unheard of in certain specialized circles. Your description, particularly of the cold signature and the internal hum, points to a specific class of phenomena. Something that some theorize might be linked to ancient, localized disruptions in the fabric of space-time, or perhaps an entity existing in a parallel dimension that occasionally bleeds into our own." My jaw dropped. Parallel dimensions. This was far wilder than anything I had imagined. "Think of it this way," Eris continued, seeing my stunned expression. We perceive three spatial dimensions plus time. What if there are others? And what if, in certain rare, geographically specific locations, often at points of natural electromagnetic confluence or ancient geological stress, those dimensions can momentarily thin, allowing a glimpse or even an interaction with what resides on the other side? And the shadow, I managed to ask. The shadow isn't an absence of light, Eris explained, leaning back. It's an absence of everything that defines our reality. It's an entity that exists in a state we can barely comprehend. The cold you perceive is likely its own inherent state, a lack of the thermal energy that pervades our universe. The hum, the pressure, that's its attempt at communication, or perhaps its natural resonance, impacting your neurological functions. So it's alive, I asked, a chill running down my spine. Eris hesitated. Alive in a way we understand life? Probably not, but it is certainly intelligent, aware, and capable of interaction. The disappearances, the Miller boy, the livestock, these are concerning. If my theory holds, then these entities, when they manifest more fully, can draw objects or beings into their own dimension. They don't consume in a biological sense, they simply relocate. Relocate? The word felt too benign for the horror I had experienced. It had relocated Jimmy Miller, erasing him from existence. What would it want? I asked, my voice trembling. Why that field? That we don't know, Eris admitted. The why of these phenomena is often beyond our grasp. Perhaps it's a portal, a tier in reality that has always been there, now actively responding. Perhaps it was disturbed by your presence, by the thought of development. Ms. Davies interjected, we've already initiated a full review of all our past projects. Any site with similar geological features or local legends will be flagged, and we're looking into establishing protocols for future surveys. This is a game changer for environmental consulting, my name. You've opened our eyes to entirely new parameters. I felt a strange mix of vindication and profound unease. I had stumbled upon something that would reshape their understanding of the world, but it had come at a heavy cost to my own sanity. What about the cabin? I asked. Is it still there? Our facilities team will retrieve your belongings, David said, and we'll be putting a fence around the field, posting warning signs, classifying it as an exclusion zone. Although I doubt a fence will do much to stop something that exists between dimensions. Indeed, Eris agreed. The fence is more for public perception to deter the curious. What you've encountered, it operates on a different plane. I spent the next few days in a daze, giving detailed statements, reviewing my notes, and consulting with Eris. He was surprisingly open-minded, listening to every nuance of my experience, asking thoughtful questions. He showed me academic papers, obscure historical accounts, and even some highly classified, redacted government documents that hinted at similar phenomena around the world: brief, unexplained disappearances, localized cold spots, strange energy readings. It was clear that this wasn't not entirely unheard of in certain specialized circles. Your description, particularly of the cold signature and the internal hum, points to a specific class of phenomena, something that some theorize might be linked to ancient, localized disruptions in the fabric of space-time, or perhaps an entity existing in a parallel dimension that occasionally bleeds into our own. My jaw dropped. Parallel dimensions. This was far wilder than anything I had imagined. Think of it this way, Eris continued, seeing my stunned expression. We perceive three spatial dimensions plus time. What if there are others? And what if, in certain rare, geographically specific locations, often at points of natural electromagnetic confluence or ancient geological stress, those dimensions can momentarily thin, allowing a glimpse or even an interaction with what resides on the other side? And the shadow, I managed to ask. The shadow isn't an absence of light, Eris explained, leaning back. It's an absence of everything that defines our reality. It's an entity that exists in a state we can barely comprehend. The cold you perceive is likely its own inherent state, a lack of the thermal energy that pervades our universe. The hum, the pressure, that's its attempt at communication, or perhaps its natural resonance, impacting your neurological functions. So it's alive, I asked, a chill running down my spine. Eris hesitated. Alive in a way we understand life? Probably not, but it is certainly intelligent, aware, and capable of interaction. The disappearances, the Miller boy, the livestock, these are concerning. If my theory holds, then these entities, when they manifest more fully, can draw objects or beings into their own dimension. They don't consume in a biological sense, they simply relocate. Relocate, the word felt too benign for the horror I had experienced. It had relocated Jimmy Miller, erasing him from existence. What would it want? I asked, my voice trembling. Why that field? That we don't know, Eris admitted. The why of these phenomena is often beyond our grasp. Perhaps it's a portal, a tier in reality that has always been there, now actively responding. Perhaps it was disturbed by your presence, by the thought of development. Ms. Davies interjected, we've already initiated a full review of all our past projects. Any site with similar geological features or local legends will be flagged, and we're looking into establishing protocols for future surveys. This is a game changer for environmental consulting, Alex. You've opened our eyes to entirely new parameters. I felt a strange mix of vindication and profound unease. I had stumbled upon something that would reshape their understanding of the world, but it had come at a heavy cost to my own sanity. What about the cabin? I asked. Is it still there? Our facilities team will retrieve your belongings, David said, and we'll be putting a fence around the field, posting warning signs, classifying it as an exclusion zone. Although I doubt a fence will do much to stop something that exists between dimensions. Indeed, Eris agreed. The fence is more for public perception to deter the curious. What you've encountered, it operates on a different plane. I spent the next few days in a daze, giving detailed statements, reviewing my notes, and consulting with Eris. He was surprisingly open-minded, listening to every nuance of my experience, asking thoughtful questions. He showed me academic papers, obscure historical accounts, and even some highly classified, redacted government documents that hinted at similar phenomena around the world: brief, unexplained disappearances, localized cold spots, strange energy readings. It was clear that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger, hidden reality. These are often referred to as thin places, Eris explained one afternoon as we sat in his cluttered office surrounded by maps and geological samples. Locations where the veil between dimensions is naturally weaker. Ancient cultures often recognized them, building sacred sites or avoiding them entirely. Modern society, with its drive for development, often blunders into them unknowingly. He pointed to a map of North America, dotted with red circles. Each of these represents a documented, unexplained disappearance or a persistent localized anomaly that defies conventional explanation. Many align with unusual geological formations, fault lines, or areas of high electromagnetic activity. Your field, the old Miller property, fits the profile perfectly. It's located at the intersection of a lesser-known fault line and a particularly strong subsurface geothermal vent, creating a unique energy signature. I traced the red circle over the Harmony Creek area, so it's like a doorway. More like a consistent tear, Eris clarified. A persistent instability. Imagine two sheets of paper representing different dimensions pressed together. Most of the time they're distinct, but in thin places there's a microfracture, a place where they're almost touching, and occasionally they might snag or pull through a thread from the other side. The entity, the shadow, might be a thread that has pulled through, or an entity that lives in the tear itself. The sheer scope of it was mind-boggling. It challenged everything I knew, everything I had been trained to believe. But the evidence, both my own experience and the documents Eris showed me, was undeniable. "What about the hum?" I asked, still feeling its phantom vibration in my skull. "If it's a form of communication, what is it trying to say?" Eris frowned, tapping his pen against a notebook. "That's the most difficult part. We have no frame of reference. It's like trying to understand an alien language with no Rosetta Stone. My working hypothesis is that it's not language in our sense, but a form of empathic or sensory resonance. It's probing, assessing, perhaps even experiencing us. The cold, the hum, these are the only ways it can interact with our dimension, or the only ways we can perceive its presence. And the disappearance is." "That's where it gets darker," he admitted. "The relocation theory. If an entity like this exists partially in our dimension, it may have the capacity to pull things fully into its own. We don't know if it's intentional, a form of feeding, or simply an accidental side effect of its presence when the tear widens enough. Some of the older, more redacted files speak of an assimilation event, where the entity expands its localized field and engulfs a physical object or living being, effectively erasing it from our reality." My blood ran cold. Jimmy Miller assimilated. "So what can we do?" I asked, feeling a renewed urgency. "Can it be stopped, contained?" Eris sighed. "That's what many dedicated, mostly unseen, people have been trying to figure out for decades. The official consensus in the deepest government circles is that active containment or destruction is largely impossible without understanding its fundamental nature. Any aggressive action could simply provoke a larger, more unpredictable response. The prevailing strategy has always been isolation and observation. Identify these thin places, label them as environmentally sensitive or protected wildlife areas, and keep people away. Your case, Alex, confirmed that approach is still valid and critical." He pulled out another file, a thick, old folder with a faded confidential stamp. There was a similar, much more aggressive incident in the late 70s in the Alaskan wilderness. A remote research outpost encountered a much larger, more volatile entity. They tried to study it, to experiment with it. It didn't end well. The entire outpost, 23 people, simply vanished. The site was subsequently classified as a no-go zone, high priority. That's why your firm's immediate response was so vital. David's quick action, his willingness to believe you, even when it sounded outlandish. I shivered, thinking about what could have happened if David hadn't taken me seriously. If I had stayed in the cabin, trying to make sense of it alone. "So what's next for us?" I asked. "For you, Alex," Eris said, leaning forward, his gaze intense. "I'd like you to work directly with me. Your direct experience is invaluable. You are currently the only living witness to have directly experienced its probing and survived intact with a coherent account. We need to compile everything we know about this specific anomaly. We need to map its patterns, try to understand its limits. This isn't just about protecting one field anymore. It's about understanding a fundamental threat to our perceived reality." The idea was daunting, terrifying, but also exhilarating. This wasn't just a job, it was a mission. I nodded. "I'm in." David, who had been listening quietly, nodded his approval. Good. We'll make sure you're compensated appropriately, Alex, and you'll have all the resources you need within reason. Your security will also be a top priority. He looked at Eris. Are there any protocols for psychological support in these situations, Eris? Eris smiled faintly. Yes, David, our special projects division has excellent resources. Alex, this is a lot to process. We'll ensure you have access to any support you might need. You faced something truly alien, and it's natural to feel disoriented. Over the next few weeks, I officially transitioned from field researcher to special project consultant under Eris Thorne. My old job was on permanent hold. I moved into a small, temporary apartment provided by the firm, located discreetly away from the main office. My life, once defined by soil samples and GPS coordinates, was now consumed by redacted documents, obscure theory, and the terrifying reality of interdimensional entities. Eris was an extraordinary mentor. He was not only brilliant, but also profoundly empathetic, understanding the psychological toll of such encounters. He encouraged me to journal my experiences, to talk through my fears, and to try to rationalize the irrational. He never dismissed my feelings, only helped me to contextualize them within this new, terrifying framework. We pored over the thermal footage David had captured. We analyzed the hum using specialized audio software, trying to detect patterns or frequencies beyond human hearing, but the effect remained primarily neurological, a silent pressure. It seems to operate almost entirely outside the electromagnetic spectrum we can readily detect, Eris mused one day, watching the blue-black thermal signature glide across the field footage. The cold is the most consistent physical manifestation. Everything else is almost an interference pattern on our own senses. Our discussions often revolved around the nature of awareness and consciousness. If the entity was intelligent, as it appeared to be, what did that intelligence entail? Did it have desires, intentions, a history? Or was it simply a natural phenomenon, an elemental force acting on its inherent principles, much like a black hole consumes matter? The relocation of Jimmy Miller and the livestock still haunted me. Was it a predator? Or merely a force of nature, indifferent to the lives it altered? One evening, while Eris was away at a conference, I was alone in the Special Projects office, reviewing a new batch of historical records. These weren't as redacted as the government files, but they were obscure, found in regional archives, folklore collections, and forgotten historical societies. They detailed local superstitions, unexplained disappearances, and strange phenomena that stretched back centuries in various isolated communities. Many of them described entities eerily similar to the shadow, tall, silent, cold presences often associated with specific landmarks or cursed patches of land. I found a particularly chilling account from the late 1800s from a logging camp in the Pacific Northwest. A logger had gone missing, and his companions described a darkness that stood upright and a silence that screamed inside your head. The journal entry ended abruptly, with the writer expressing his intention to leave the camp immediately, never to return. As I read, a faint, almost imperceptible vibration began in my chest. My breath hitched. It was the hum. The silent thrum I had felt in the field, then in the truck with David, and occasionally, faintly, in my apartment during my sleepless nights. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. It wasn't just in my head, it was real. Here in the city, hundreds of miles from the field, it was following me. I gripped the edge of the desk, my knuckles white. I scanned the office, heart hammering. No thermal cameras here. No David beside me. Just me alone in a locked office on the 5th floor of a modern building. The hum intensified not to the unbearable pressure of the field, but steadily, persistently. It felt like a low, resonant note reverberating through my bones. It was a question, an observation. It knew I was here. It had found me. I tried to rationalize it, stress, paranoia, but the feeling was too distinct, too familiar. It was the same alien presence. I pushed back my chair, standing up slowly. My eyes darted to the reinforced door, then to the large window overlooking the city skyline. Where was it? Could it manifest here? Could it relocate me right here in the office? A sudden, sharp drop in temperature hit the room. It was localized directly behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Nothing, just the wall covered in cork board and maps, but the cold was undeniable, a chilling pocket of air. And the hum intensified, vibrating now not just in my chest, but directly behind my ears, as if whispering to me from within my own mind. I stumbled back, knocking over my chair. My hands instinctively reached for my phone, but what good would it do? Who would I call? What would I say? "Hello," I whispered, my voice trembling, breaking the oppressive silence of the office. It felt ridiculous, speaking to empty air. The hum pulsed, a silent answer, a presence that weighed down the very air. The cold behind me seemed to deepen, like a hand pressed against my back. Then a faint, almost imperceptible shimmering appeared on the wall where the cold spot was strongest. It wasn't a shadow, not like in the field. It was more like heat haze, but cold, distorting the wallpaper slightly. It was so subtle, so brief, I almost thought I imagined it. But the hum, the cold, these were undeniable. It was trying to bridge the gap. It was trying to come through. I fled, not a panic sprint, but a desperate dash for the door. My fingers fumbled with the key card, my hand shaking so violently I dropped it. I snatched it up, swiped, and pushed the heavy door open, tumbling out into the empty hallway. The hum receded immediately, leaving behind a ringing silence and the frantic pounding of my own heart. The hallway felt normal, warm, safe. The office door swung shut behind me, the lock clicking into place with a definitive thud. I leaned against the opposite wall, gasping for breath, my knees threatening to buckle. It had followed me. It wasn't confined to the field. It was tied to me. Or perhaps it had learned how to cross over more easily after our interactions. When Eris returned the next morning, he found me huddled in the break room, nursing a cold coffee, my face pale. I recounted the experience, every terrifying detail. He listened intently, his expression grave. "It seems my hypothesis of localized instability might be evolving," he said, his voice quiet. "Or perhaps it's not the location that anchors it, but the point of interaction. You, Alex, might have become a conduit, or at least a focal point for its attention." "So it followed me?" I asked, the implication chilling me to the bone. "It appears to have found a way to bridge the gap, even in a different location. The shimmer you described, the localized cold, that indicates a brief, partial manifestation. It's testing the boundaries, it's learning." The idea that it was learning was more terrifying than anything else. An alien intelligence studying me, experimenting with me. "What does it want?" I repeated the question that had plagued me since the beginning. "Perhaps it wants to understand you," Eris suggested, leaning forward. Or perhaps it sees you as a potential bridge, a means to fully manifest in our dimension. The miller boy, the livestock, perhaps they were attempts, accidental or deliberate, to pull through something with more substance. He paused, collecting his thoughts. This changes our approach dramatically. We can no longer assume it's a static, site-specific anomaly. It's dynamic, it's seeking. Seeking what? Eris looked at me, his eyes filled with a new kind of concern. Alex, we don't know, but we need to find out, and we need to ensure your safety. If you are indeed a focal point, then you are both our greatest asset and our greatest vulnerability. He immediately instituted new security protocols. My apartment was swept for any anomalies, though nothing physical was ever found. I was given a discreet tracking device disguised as a keychain and instructed to carry it at all times. A small, portable, high-frequency electromagnetic field generator was installed in my apartment, a prototype designed to create a localized energetic static that Eris hoped might interfere with the entity's ability to manifest or send its hum. He called it a null field generator. It's experimental, he admitted, installing the device, which looked like a sleek black speaker, in my living room. If its existence relies on a certain energetic resonance or dimensional thinning, this might create enough interference to block it, or at least weaken its ability to reach you. The device hummed softly, a barely audible white noise that, paradoxically, made me feel a little safer than the silent, oppressive hum of the entity. Our research intensified. We no longer just studied the field, we studied me. Eris subjected me to various tests, neurological scans, psychological evaluations, even some experimental biofeedback sessions, trying to understand how the entity's hum affected my brain and body. Nothing definitive. My brain waves showed mild signs of stress, but no direct evidence of external influence. It's too subtle, Eris concluded. Or it operates on a level we can't yet measure. The effect is profound, but its footprint is minimal. Despite the precautions, the sense of being watched never left me. Sometimes, late at night, I would feel the faint pressure of the hum, even with the null field generator active. It was weaker, more distant, like a radio signal struggling through static, but it was there. It was a constant reminder that I was still connected, still observed. One morning, Eris called me into his office, his face uncharacteristically grim. He handed me a tablet displaying a satellite image of the Miller property. The security team reported an incident last night, he said, his voice low. The fence around the field, it was damaged. My stomach clenched. Damaged how? Not breached, not broken by force. It was warped. Sections of the chain-link fence were twisted, as if by immense, invisible pressure, but without any discernible points of contact. The metal simply bent and stretched in impossible ways, and several of the warning signs, the ones we laminated and bolted to the fence posts, were gone. He zoomed in on a section of the image. The fence indeed looked like it had been subjected to some kind of incredible, non-physical force. Sections were stretched taut, almost to snapping, while others were compressed inwards. It was profoundly unsettling. The thermal cameras we left on site also picked up activity, Eris continued, playing a short video clip. The familiar blue-black thermal signature of the shadow moved across the field, closer to the damaged fence line than it had ever been before. It seemed to linger there, almost examining the barrier. It's reacting to our presence, to our attempts to contain it, I whispered, a cold dread creeping through me. It's learning what we're doing. Precisely, Eris confirmed, and it's pushing back. The missing signs, that's almost like a deliberate act. An entity that has no physical form somehow removed physical objects. This confirms our theory that its ability to relocate isn't just about living beings. It can interact, subtly or not so subtly, with our physical reality. It's becoming more active, I observed, my voice tight, more aggressive. Agreed, and the localized manifestations you're experiencing in the city, the hum, the cold, the shimmer, it seems to be actively trying to establish a stronger foothold, using you as its focus. We need to understand why it's doing this and what its ultimate goal is. Eris then revealed his new plan. We need to go back to the field, Alex, not just us. We need to deploy a full research team with specialized equipment. We need to establish a temporary, highly secure research outpost near the field, but not in it. We need to monitor it continuously for days, weeks, maybe even months. We need to attempt to communicate with it, or at least establish some kind of pattern to its behavior. My blood ran cold at the thought of returning, but I knew it was necessary. The entity was escalating. It wasn't content to remain a passive anomaly. What kind of specialized equipment? I asked, trying to push down my rising anxiety. Beyond thermal and M scanners, we'll be using high-frequency sonic emitters, localized gravity field detectors, and even some experimental subspace field sensors, Eris explained, his eyes gleaming with professional excitement despite the grim reality. This equipment is highly sensitive, designed to detect minute distortions in the fabric of space-time. We'll also have an energy dampening field around our base camp, a more powerful version of the null field generator in your apartment. And most importantly, we'll have a full security detail. Ex-military, highly trained with specialized non-lethal deterrence. This sounded like a full-blown military operation, not an environmental survey. The reality of what we were dealing with settled deeper into my bones. When do we leave? I asked, resigned. As soon as logistics are in place, 2 weeks, perhaps 3. In the meantime, you'll be integral to planning the research protocols, Alex. Your unique perspective will be invaluable. We'll be focusing on non-invasive observation first. No direct confrontation, no attempts to capture or harm it, just pure data collection. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I worked closely with Eris, David, and a team of physicists and engineers. We designed sensor grids, observation schedules, and emergency protocols. I found myself surprisingly adept at contributing, my field experience blending with the theoretical knowledge Eris provided. My initial terror slowly morphed into a focused determination. This entity was a mystery, and I was part of the team trying to solve it. The field site, now officially designated as Anomaly Site HC1, Harmony Creek 1, became the central focus of a multi-agency, highly secretive operation. The firm had leveraged its government contracts and Eris's deep connections to bring in resources far beyond a typical environmental consulting company. It was clear that this was not just about the solar farm anymore. It was about national security, perhaps even global implications. I was briefed on the security team, a small, tight-knit unit led by a seasoned veteran named Commander Thorne, no relation to Eris, but equally serious and methodical. He was a gruff man with watchful eyes who made it clear he didn't fully understand what we were facing, but he trusted Eris and was prepared for anything. Finally, the day came. A convoy of unmarked, reinforced vehicles packed with equipment and personnel left the city under the cover of darkness. I was in Eris's vehicle, my heart a mixture of trepidation and anticipation. We were returning to the source. The drive was long, silent, and filled with a palpable tension. As we neared Harmony Creek, I could feel the familiar weight in the air, a subtle shift in the energy of the land. The quiet of the foothills, once peaceful, now felt heavy, watchful. Our base camp was set up a quarter-mile from the field, just beyond the scrub oak, nestled amongst a cluster of old pine trees. It was a prefabricated modular unit, disguised as a temporary geological survey station, complete with its own power generators, communication equipment, and a robust energy-dampening field. The security team established a perimeter, with motion sensors and thermal cameras blanketing the area. Stepping out of the vehicle, the air was crisp and cool. The stars above were brilliant, unhindered by city lights. But beneath that beauty, I felt the pervasive chill, the subtle hum that vibrated just beyond the edge of hearing. It was here. It was waiting. Our first task was to deploy the sensor array. Under the watchful eyes of the security team, we carefully positioned various detectors around the perimeter of the exclusion zone, focusing on the area where the shadow most frequently manifested. Eris had designed a multi-layered grid, hoping to capture every possible fluctuation. The damaged fence was still there, a testament to the entity's power. Sections were indeed twisted in impossible ways, some posts bent inward, others outward, without any clear point of impact. It was like looking at something that had been physically warped from within. The missing warning signs were still gone, a bizarre detail that Commander Thorne found particularly unsettling. "It's almost like it's mocking us," he'd grumbled. As twilight began to descend on our first evening, a hush fell over the camp. Everyone was focused on the monitor bank inside the main module, displaying feeds from the newly deployed sensors. The thermal cameras showed the field in grainy monochrome. The visible light cameras struggled with the fading light, but the more sensitive subspace and gravity detectors were already picking up subtle, almost imperceptible fluctuations. "Baseline readings are stable," a young physicist named Dr. Anya Sharma reported, her fingers flying across a keyboard. "No immediate high-energy signatures." Eris, his eyes glued to the main screen, nodded. "Patience. It usually manifests after full dark or around twilight. It's a creature of thresholds." I sat beside him, my hands clasped tightly, a mix of apprehension and a strange sense of belonging. I was finally back where this nightmare began, but this time I wasn't alone. I was part of a team armed with knowledge and technology. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues that quickly faded to deep indigo. The field became a vast, silent expanse of shadows. The air grew colder, and a palpable tension settled over the camp. And then Eris pointed. "There." On the main thermal monitor, a faint blue-black smudge began to appear just as before near the scrub oak. It was subtle, almost translucent at first, but it was there. The temperature in the vicinity of the anomaly dropped significantly, confirmed by multiple thermal probes. "It's coming in," Anya whispered, her voice tight with awe. The shadow solidified, growing taller, thinner, a column of absolute cold against the warming earth. It was exactly as I had described it, but seeing it on the advanced monitors, seeing the objective data, was a different kind of chilling. Then the hum began. I felt it first, a familiar vibration in my chest, a pressure in my skull. I glanced at Eris. His eyes were wide, fixed on the screen, but I could tell he felt it too. Anya visibly recoiled, clutching her head. The hum is present, she exclaimed, her voice strained. Frequency appears to be below human hearing, possibly infrasound, but it's creating a resonant frequency in the internal ear canal, impacting neurological processes directly. She was speaking like a scientist, but her body language screamed terror. Subspace field fluctuations are off the charts, another tech reported, his voice shaky. Gravity readings are dropping in its immediate vicinity, a localized negative gravitational field, perhaps. It's almost like it's lighter than air. The shadow moved, gliding silently towards the center of the field. It didn't appear to notice our camp, or if it did, it ignored us, maintaining its deliberate, flowing movement. It stopped directly in the middle of the field, the center of our sensor grid. The hum intensified. It felt like a tangible wave pressing against the very module walls. The air inside the command center grew noticeably colder despite our climate control. Eris, despite his obvious discomfort, was composed. Commander Thorn, ready the sonic emitters, low frequency, wide spectrum. Let's see if we can disrupt its field or at least get a reaction. Commander Thorn, standing beside the communication console, gave a curt nod. Acknowledged, sonic emitters engaging in 30 seconds. A few moments later, a low, throbbing sound, barely audible but deeply felt, began to emanate from the field. It wasn't an attack, just a gentle, pervasive vibration meant to interact with the entity's presumed frequency. The shadow, which had been perfectly still, shimmered, its edges blurred, then sharpened as if taking a deep, silent breath. The hum intensified dramatically, becoming a shrill internal shriek that threatened to burst my eardrums. My head pounded. Anya cried out, collapsing to her knees, clutching her temples. "It's reacting," Anya gasped, trying to push through the pain. "It's pushing back. The hum is exponentially stronger." Eris immediately ordered, "Disengage sonic emitters. Abort, abort." The throbbing sound from the emitters ceased. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the intense shriek of the hum began to recede. The pressure on my mind lessened, and Anya slowly began to recover, gasping for air. The shadow remained in the center of the field, perfectly still. But its thermal signature was now denser, darker. It felt angry, or at least aware of our attempt to interfere. "It doesn't like intervention," Eris stated, his voice tight. "Note to self, non-invasive observation only. Any attempt to interact with its energetic field elicits a powerful, adverse response." We spent the rest of the night in silent observation, recording every minute detail. The shadow remained in the field, a silent, menacing sentinel. The hum continued, a low thrum that was always present, always watchful. It didn't approach the camp, but its presence weighed heavily on everyone. By dawn, as the first rays of sunlight touched the distant hills, the shadow began to recede. It didn't dissipate suddenly, but slowly, subtly, like ink fading from water. Its thermal signature grew fainter, its form less distinct, until it was just a lingering patch of cold that slowly warmed to ambient temperature. The hum faded with it, leaving behind an echoing silence and a profound sense of exhaustion. "Well," Eris said, rubbing his temples, "that was productive, if terrifying. We have an incredible amount of data. This confirms its sentience, its ability to react, and its sensitivity to external energetic interference. It also confirms that the hum is a core part of its manifestation." Over the next few days and nights, the pattern repeated itself. The shadow would appear at twilight, remain in the field through the night, and recede at dawn. We observed, recorded, and analyzed. We learned to anticipate the rise and fall of the hum, the subtle shifts in its thermal and subspace signatures. One evening, as the shadow stood silently in the field, Eris decided to try a different approach. We'll attempt a very subtle, non-energetic form of communication, he announced. A visual signal. Alex, you've spent the most time in its direct presence. You also experienced its most direct probing. I want you to try. My stomach knotted. Me, what do you want me to do? We'll use a powerful, tightly focused laser pointer, he explained. Not aimed at it, but around it. A simple pattern. A circle, then a square, then a triangle. Very slow, very deliberate. Let's see if it acknowledges the pattern. The idea felt like a colossal gamble. After its reaction to the sonic emitters, provoking it further felt incredibly dangerous. But Eris was convinced that a non-energetic, visually distinct pattern might be interpreted differently. I stood at the edge of the module, shielded by its energy-dampening field, with a long-range, high-powered laser in my hand. Commander Thorne and his security detail stood ready, their non-lethal deterrents charged. Eris and Anya were glued to the monitors, ready to record any reaction. The shadow stood motionless in the field, a column of impenetrable darkness against the starlit sky. The hum was a low thrum in my skull, a constant reminder of its awareness. Taking a deep breath, I activated the laser. A thin, brilliant green beam cut through the darkness. I slowly, carefully traced a large circle in the air about 20 feet to the left of the shadow. The beam passed through the night, illuminating the grass beyond, leaving no trace on the entity itself. I completed the circle, then paused. The hum remained constant. The shadow did not move. Then I slowly drew a square 20 feet to its right. Again, the laser passed through the empty air, the shadow impassive. Finally, I traced a triangle directly above it, well above its towering height. Still nothing, no visible reaction from the shadow, no change in the hum. My heart sank. It wasn't responding. Wait, Anya suddenly said, her voice sharp. Look at the subspace readings and the gravity sensors. We all looked at the monitors, the graphs, which had been relatively stable despite the laser light were now spiking wildly, not just minor fluctuations, but sharp, dramatic shifts. The subspace field around the shadow was fluctuating intensely, almost like a localized storm of altered reality. And the gravity readings were oscillating rapidly, indicating brief, powerful reductions and increases in gravitational pull centered on the entity. It's not visible, but it's reacting internally, Anya exclaimed, her voice filled with a mixture of terror and scientific exhilaration. The patterns, it's responding to the patterns you're creating, Alex. The energy it's emitting, it's mirroring the geometric forms, but in a non-physical way. Eris leaned closer to the monitor, his eyes wide with a profound realization. She's right, look at the spectral analysis of the subspace distortions. Each time Alex completes a shape, there's a corresponding intricate shift in its energy signature. It's not reflecting the light, it's reflecting the concept of the shape into its own energetic state. My breath hitched, it was responding, not in a way we could see with our eyes, but on a fundamental, energetic level. It was acknowledging our attempt at communication, interpreting the abstract idea of the shapes I was drawing in the air. "Try another one, Alex," Eris urged, his voice barely a whisper, completely absorbed in the data. "A more complex sequence. A circle, then two squares, then a triangle." My hand was shaking, but I forced myself to focus. This was it. This was the breakthrough. I drew the circle, slowly, deliberately. The hum, which had remained a low thrum, subtly pulsed, a vibration deep within my chest. On the monitors, the subspace fields responded, a flurry of intricate energy spikes mimicking the circular form. Then two squares, one after the other. Each one elicited a distinct, layered response on the monitors, a complex dance of energy that Anya was frantically trying to record and analyze. Finally, the triangle. The hum intensified slightly, a subtle shift that indicated a heightened awareness. "Remarkable," Eris breathed, running a hand through his hair. "It's processing information. It's analyzing the patterns. This is definitive proof of advanced intelligence, operating on principles we're only just beginning to grasp." Commander Thorne, who had been watching the monitors with a grim expression, spoke into his comms. "Maintain full alert. No change in visual manifestation, but the entity is highly active on deep scan. Proceed with extreme caution." We continued the experiment for another hour, creating increasingly complex patterns. The shadow remained visually impassive, but its internal energetic state became a vibrant, dynamic canvas on our monitors. It was like communicating with a being that existed in a higher dimension, where concepts and energies were its language, not physical forms. Finally, Eris called a halt. "That's enough for tonight, Alex. You've done exceptionally well. We have an unprecedented amount of data. This changes everything." The exhaustion hit me like a physical wave as I lowered the laser. My mind was reeling. I had communicated with an interdimensional entity. Not with words, not with sight, but with the very fabric of reality. Over the next few days, we continued this form of non-invasive, pattern-based communication. Eris, Anya, and I developed a simple code, using different sequences of shapes and durations to represent basic concepts: presence, observation, question. We started with simple binary responses. If the entity amplified a certain frequency on the subspace detectors, it meant yes. If it dampened it, it meant no. It was crude, laborious, and imprecise, but it was a start. The entity's responses were slow, deliberate, and often ambiguous. It was like trying to decipher an alien language from a few fragmented signals. But there were patterns. When we asked, with a carefully crafted sequence of lights, "Are you aware of our presence?" the subspace readings would spike with a yes pattern. When we asked, "Are you a threat?" the response was often a rapid, intense oscillation, neither a clear yes nor no, but something more akin to complex or unpredictable. The hum remained a constant companion, a low thrum that intensified with its focused attention, but never reached the unbearable shriek of our first direct interaction. It was as if it was learning to modulate its presence, or perhaps we were learning to filter it. One evening, after several successful exchanges of simple concepts, Eris decided to push the boundaries. "Alex," he said, his eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and apprehension, "I want you to ask it about the Miller boy. Use the sequence for disappearance followed by human child and a question pattern." My stomach churned. This was a direct, uncomfortable question, potentially venturing into dangerous territory. but the thought of Jimmy Miller assimilated into another dimension spurred me on. I carefully executed the sequence. The green laser danced around the shadow, painting its abstract questions into the night. The hum deepened, becoming a resonant, unsettling thrum. On the monitors, the subspace readings became chaotic, a maelstrom of conflicting energies. The gravity sensors oscillated wildly. Then something happened that made my blood run cold. The shadow, which had always maintained its perfectly rectangular, column-like form, began to distort. Its edges shimmered, not like the brief, subtle distortions in my office, but profoundly. It seemed to ripple, to waver, as if struggling to hold its shape. And from within its form, for the first time, a dark, undulating mass appeared, like an internal churning. It was still entirely opaque, a deeper shade of black against the absolute blackness of its form, but it was unmistakably movement within its core. The hum intensified not to a shriek, but to a throbbing, bass-heavy pulse that resonated through the ground, through the module's reinforced floor. It felt like a heartbeat, but a monstrous, alien one. "What's happening?" Anya cried out, her face pale, her hands hovering over her keyboard. "The energy readings are off the charts. It's highly agitated." Eris, despite his fear, was mesmerized. "It's reacting to the question. It's a profound reaction. The internal distortion, it's almost like it's trying to show us something, but it lacks the means. Or perhaps it's struggling with the memory, the concept itself." The internal churning within the shadow grew more intense. The very air outside the module seemed to crackle with an unnatural energy. The energy dampening field around the camp flickered, struggling to maintain integrity. "Commander Thorne," Eris shouted, his voice strained. "Prepare to fully activate the dampening field. Power to maximum." "Already on it, Dr. Thorne," the commander replied, his voice calm but his eyes watchful. "The perimeter is holding for now, but whatever it's doing, it's pushing against our field." Just as quickly as it began, the internal churning subsided. The shadow's form stabilized, reverting to its perfect column. The hum, while still present, receded to its normal, low thrum. The energy-dampening field returned to full power. But the experience left us shaken. It was clear that the question of the disappearances, the relocation of humans, was a highly sensitive topic for the entity. It elicited a visceral, energetic response, hinting at an emotional or conceptual depth we hadn't anticipated. "It knows about the Miller boy," I whispered, my voice hoarse, "and it reacted strongly. What does that mean?" Eris sighed, running a hand over his tired face. "It means it's not an indifferent force of nature, Alex. It means there's an awareness, perhaps even a guilt or a profound distress associated with those events. Or perhaps it perceives the act differently than we do." This incident marked a shift in our approach. We understood that direct questioning about assimilation events was too volatile. We needed to understand its nature, its existence, before we could delve into its past actions. Weeks turned into a month. Our understanding of anomaly site HC1 grew exponentially. We mapped its daily cycle, its subtle energetic fluctuations, its responses to environmental changes. We learned that while the shadow appeared nightly, its energetic footprint would subtly remain in the field even during the day, a lingering cold spot on sensitive thermal scans, a faint subspace distortion. The tear was always there, just more pronounced at night. The entity itself, which we now formally referred to as the manifestation or simply HC1, continued its nightly vigil. It would appear at twilight, stand silently in the middle of the field, and dissipate at dawn. Its hum became a familiar, if unsettling, part of our nightly routine. We learned to live with its pervasive presence, the constant awareness that we were being observed by something truly alien. One particularly clear night, Eris was experimenting with a new array of gravimetric sensors, hoping to get a more precise reading of the entity's mass or lack thereof. The shadow was in its usual position, still and silent. The hum was present, a low vibration in the module. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine erupted from the gravimetric sensors. Alarms blared. "Gravimetric readings off the charts," Anya shouted, pointing at a monitor. "It's a massive spike, negative mass detected, like a vacuum in space-time." The module lights flickered, power surging and draining. Outside, the energy-dampening field around the camp flared violently, sparks flying from the generators. "Full system overload," a tech yelled, "power levels critically low." My heart hammered. This wasn't a localized energetic surge like before. This was systemic. The entire camp was being affected. Then, from outside, a chilling, guttural scream ripped through the night. It wasn't human. It sounded like an animal in agony. Commander Thorne immediately grabbed his comms. "Security team, report. What was that?" Silence, just the persistent wail of the gravimetric sensors and the flickering lights. "Security team echo, report," he barked again, his face grim. "Anyone on the south perimeter, report now." More silence. The scream had cut off abruptly. "Alex, Eris, Anya, stay in the module," Thorne ordered, grabbing a modified energy rifle. "Something's out there, and it's not HC1, or it's interacting differently." He left the module with two of his remaining security personnel, their weapons raised, heading towards the south perimeter. Inside, we watched the monitors, terrified. The gravimetric readings around HC1 were still spiking, but now they were accompanied by intense, localized M pulses, not from the shadow itself, but from the southern edge of the field near the perimeter of our camp. "Multiple energy signatures," Anya exclaimed, her voice trembling. "Not consistent with HC1, smaller, more chaotic, highly energetic." Then, on the thermal cameras covering the south perimeter, we saw it. Not the silent, cold column of the shadow, but brief, flickering patches of intense heat moving erratically. They were humanoid in shape, but distorted, too fast, too angular. And then a flicker of something far larger, more amorphous, moving with incredible speed. "What are those things?" I whispered, my blood turning to ice. Eris's face was pale. I don't know. This is unprecedented. HC1 has never been observed with the accompaniments." Suddenly, the gravimetric sensors around HC1 went completely silent, the high-pitched wail dying abruptly. The module lights stabilized. The energy-dampening field flared back to full power. And then on the main monitor, something truly shocking happened. The shadow, HC1, which had always remained perfectly still in the middle of the field, began to move. It glided across the field with an almost impossible speed directly towards the southern perimeter where the commotion had been. It wasn't its usual slow, deliberate translation. It was a sudden, urgent rush. As it moved, its form seemed to expand, to thicken, its blue-black thermal signature growing denser, larger. The hum, which had previously been a controlled thrum, erupted into a powerful, resonating roar that shook the very foundations of the module. It wasn't just in our heads anymore. It was an external force, a wave of pure, silent pressure. "It's reacting to the other entities," Eris shouted over the roar. "It's responding, it's engaging." On the thermal cameras, as HC-1 approached the southern perimeter, it seemed to interact with the flickering heat signatures. The smaller, humanoid shapes scattered, almost recoiling from HC-1's approach. The larger, amorphous mass seemed to hesitate, then it too began to retreat. The roar from HC-1 intensified further, a wave of overwhelming pressure that felt like it was tearing at my mind. The air in the module became impossibly cold, despite the functioning climate control. Then HC-1 seemed to coalesce, its form momentarily becoming incredibly dense, like a black hole drawing in all light and energy. The smaller heat signatures simply vanished, one after another, as if absorbed by the intensified darkness around HC-1. The larger amorphous entity, still visible on the thermal, seemed to hesitate for a moment, then it vanished too, with a final, chilling flicker. The roar from HC-1 suddenly cut off. The profound cold receded. The shadow, now back in the center of the southern perimeter, slowly began to shrink, its thermal signature returning to its usual density. It paused, then slowly, deliberately, glided back to its accustomed place in the middle of the field. The hum returned to its low thrum. The night was once again silent, save for the distant chirping of crickets. Commander Thorne and his 2 men returned, shaken but unharmed. "We found a fresh deer carcass on the perimeter," he reported, his voice tight. "Torn apart, not by an animal, it was desiccated, and one of our sensor drones, a small aerial unit, completely fried, but no sign of whatever that was. The drone was on the other side of the fence, near the deer." Eris, his face pale, slowly turned to us. HC-1 didn't just manifest, it actively engaged and dispersed other entities. Entities we've never seen before. What if it wasn't just a portal, Alex? What if it was a guardian? The idea hit me with the force of a physical blow. A guardian, protecting the field, protecting us from something far more aggressive. The Miller boy, the livestock, perhaps they weren't its victims, but casualties of other forces that it was usually keeping at bay. "We need to reevaluate everything," Eris declared, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "This changes the entire dynamic. HC-1 might not be the primary threat, it might be a localized defender. And those other entities, those were clearly hostile." The next few days were a blur of analysis and reassessment. Anya meticulously reviewed every frame of the thermal footage, every energy spike, every gravimetric anomaly. We identified the new entities as having distinct, unstable energy signatures, unlike HC-1's consistent cold. They seemed to operate on a different principle, characterized by intense heat and chaotic M pulses, almost like living discharges of raw energy. "They appear to be opportunistic," Anya concluded after days of sifting through data. "They manifest in areas of heightened dimensional instability, drawn to the energetic output, and they seem to consume or assimilate in a much more violent, destructive way than HC-1. The deer carcass, the fried drone, that's consistent with their patterns of interaction." Eris theorized that these new entities, which we tentatively labeled warmers due to their thermal signatures, might be interdimensional scavengers, drawn to the thin places where the veil was weak. And HC1, the silent cold column, might be actively maintaining the stability of the tier, preventing full-scale breaches and deterring these scavengers. "The miller boy, the livestock," I said, remembering the unsettling reaction of HC1 to the question. What if it was HC1 that relocated them? What if it was these warmers? And HC1 was reacting to our question about them, not about its own actions. Eris nodded slowly. "It's a powerful hypothesis, Alex. It explains the distressed reaction. HC1 might perceive the disappearances as failures on its part or as aggressions from these other entities. It's a tragic consequence of the dimensional instability it's trying to contain." This new understanding shifted the entire mission. We were no longer just observing an anomaly. We were studying a complex ecosystem of interdimensional phenomena, with HC1 potentially acting as a crucial, if enigmatic, protector. Our communication attempts with HC1 became more nuanced. We tried to convey understanding, to apologize for our previous aggressive probes. We used patterns to represent other entities, danger, protection. HC1's responses, while still abstract, seemed to indicate an acknowledgement, a subtle calming of its overall hum and energetic output. It was as if a silent, unspoken alliance was beginning to form. Commander Thorne, initially skeptical of HC1's potential role as a guardian, was convinced after the incident. He doubled the security perimeter, deployed more advanced sensor grids, and established rapid response protocols for any manifestation of the warmers. His team now saw HC1 not as the enemy, but as a silent, powerful, and utterly alien force that was, paradoxically, on our side. Days turned into weeks, then months. The Harmony Creek outpost became a permanent fixture, a silent sentinel in the foothills, dedicated to understanding and monitoring anomaly site HC1. My role expanded even further. I was no longer just a witness, I was a bridge. My intuitive understanding of HC1, my ability to feel its hum and interpret its subtle energetic shifts, made me invaluable to Eris. We discovered that HC1's internal energetic state was incredibly complex. Anya developed advanced algorithms to analyze the fluctuating subspace and gravimetric readings, translating them into complex, three-dimensional patterns that appeared on our holographic displays. It was like looking into the mind of an alien being, a universe of pure thought and energy. One night, as I watched the swirling, intricate patterns on the holographic display, I felt the hum deepen, pulling me into a state of profound focus. It wasn't a question or an observation, but something more. It felt like an invitation. I looked at Eris. "It wants to show us something," I whispered, "something more." Eris, who had come to trust my intuition implicitly, nodded. "What do you mean, Alex?" "The patterns," I said, pointing to the holographic display. "They're becoming more coherent, more narrative. It's not just responding, it's initiating." Over the next few nights, HC1 did just that. Through complex, sustained patterns on our monitors, it began to transmit what could only be described as information. It was slow, laborious, and frustratingly abstract, but it was there. Eris, Anya, and I spent hours trying to decipher it, building a rudimentary, energetic Rosetta Stone. We learned about the tier, not just one, but a network of them, thin places spanning the globe, each watched over by an entity similar to HC1. These entities were not individuals in our sense, but aspects of a larger collective consciousness, a pervasive presence whose purpose was to maintain dimensional stability. We learned about the warmers, the opportunistic entities that sought to exploit these tiers to consume or convert matter and energy from our dimension for their own unknown purposes. They were chaotic, destructive, and without what we would recognize as a fixed form or intelligence, operating purely on instinct. They were attracted to high-energy events, to disruptions, to any weakening of the veil. And then, the most unsettling revelation. HC-1 began to transmit information about us, not just our presence at the camp, but details about humanity itself. Our history of conflict, our technological advancements, our impact on the planet. It was as if it had been observing us for centuries, perhaps millennia, a silent, pervasive observer. It sees us as a source of instability, Eris concluded, after we pieced together a particularly dense data stream. Our nuclear weapons, our deforestation, our constant energy consumption, it perceives these as creating ripples in the dimensional fabric, attracting the warmers and weakening the integrity of the tiers. My blood ran cold. HC-1 wasn't just a guardian of a field, it was a guardian of reality itself, and it saw humanity as a potential threat to that reality. "So, what does it want?" I asked, a sense of dread creeping into my voice. "If it sees us as a threat, what's to stop it from assimilating us all to remove the threat?" Eris frowned. "That's the crucial question. Its nature seems to be one of preservation, not aggression. It reacted with distress to the Miller boy, to the concept of relocation. It seems to view that as a failure or a necessary evil in the face of a greater threat. But it's also clear it is growing increasingly concerned about our continued presence and our species' trajectory." The atmosphere in the camp became charged with a new kind of tension. We were no longer just observers, we were subjects. And the entity we had come to study was studying us and perhaps judging us. One night, the hum intensified dramatically. It wasn't aggressive, but insistent, drawing us all into a state of heightened awareness. HC-1 began to transmit a complex, urgent sequence of patterns. Anya, working furiously, translated the raw data into visual forms on the holographic display. It was a representation of the solar system, our sun, the planets, and then a particular planet glowing with intense, chaotic energy, Earth, and around it subtle, almost invisible tendrils reaching out from the dimensional fabric, growing stronger, thicker. "It's showing us that the warmers are increasing their activity," Anya whispered, her face pale. "They're gathering. The veil is thinning globally. It's because of us, our activity." Eris leaned forward, his eyes wide. "It's a warning, Alex, a dire warning. It's telling us that the dimensional instability is reaching a critical point, that the warmers are poised to breach our reality on a much larger scale, beyond just these localized tiers." The implications were catastrophic. Not just a solar farm halted, but a global threat to existence. And HC-1, our silent guardian, was telling us that humanity was inadvertently causing its own undoing. The patterns intensified, showing increasingly volatile energy signatures, breaches in multiple locations, entire regions consumed by chaotic thermal events. It was a terrifying vision of a future we were sleepwalking into. And then a new pattern appeared. It was complex, multi-layered, and clearly a question. But it wasn't a binary yes-no question. It was asking for a decision, a choice. Eris worked with Anya, meticulously decoding the intricate layers of the pattern. The hum pulsed, a rhythmic beat that echoed the gravity of the moment. Finally, Eris looked up, his face grim. "It's asking for our assistance, Alex, not just to monitor, but to act. It's proposing a collaboration. It needs us to help stabilize the dimensional fabric, to find a way to reduce the energy output that attracts the warmers, to mitigate humanity's destabilizing effects." "And if we do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Eris turned back to the holographic display, where the chaotic patterns of a breached Earth continued to swirl. "It implies that the alternative is an assimilation event on a planetary scale. A full breach where the warmers overwhelm the existing guardians and our reality is consumed." The choice was stark, terrifying, and overwhelming. We had stumbled upon an interdimensional custodian, and now it was laying the fate of the world at our feet. The entire team in the module was silent, absorbing the enormity of the message. Commander Thorne, usually stoic, leaned against the wall, his face etched with disbelief and dread. Anya stared at the holographic display, tears welling in her eyes. "What kind of assistance?" I finally managed to ask. "What could we possibly do?" Eris took a deep breath. "That's what it's hoping we can figure out. It has the knowledge of the dimensional fabric, the points of weakness, the nature of the entities. But it lacks the physical means to act within our reality. We, with our technology, our understanding of physics, our ability to manipulate matter and energy, we are its only hope. We are the architects of our own potential destruction, and perhaps our only salvation." The conversation that followed was intense and went late into the night. We discussed everything from radical global energy policy changes to experimental technology designed to stabilize space-time. Eris believed that if we could find a way to reduce our global energetic footprint, especially in areas that resonated with the thin places, and perhaps deploy some form of counter-frequency or dimensional stabilizer at these critical points, we might have a chance. The next morning, Eris sent a highly encrypted report, not to the firm, but directly to a select group of individuals in various governments and specialized agencies, the secret circles he had hinted at. The report detailed HC-1's communication, the global threat of the warmers, and the proposed collaboration. It was a gamble, a massive breach of protocol, but the stakes were too high. The response was swift and decisive. Within 48 hours, the Harmony Creek site was flooded with new personnel. Not just scientists and security, but government officials, military strategists, and representatives from what appeared to be highly secretive international organizations. The camp expanded, becoming a small, self-sufficient town under the guise of an advanced geological research facility. I found myself in a whirlwind of high-level meetings. My direct experience with HC-1, my ability to feel the hum and interpret its subtle shifts, made me a critical asset. I was now a primary liaison between humanity and an interdimensional guardian. My voice carried weight, often translating abstract energetic patterns into urgent, understandable directives for military and policy experts. One of the first questions posed by the assembled experts was about the nature of the alliance. "Can we trust it?" a stern-faced general asked, eyeing the thermal feed of HC-1 suspiciously. "It's an alien entity. It could be manipulating us, playing a larger game." It was my job to explain. It's not manipulative in a human sense, General. Its existence is defined by balance, by stasis. Its concern is for the integrity of reality itself. We are simply a disruptive element it now needs to work with to achieve that stasis. Our survival is secondary to the stability of the dimensional fabric, but it seems to understand that our destruction would be a major energetic disruption itself, hence the offer of collaboration. The logic was cold, hard, and utterly alien, but it resonated with the pragmatic minds in the room. This wasn't about good or evil, but about systemic stability. Over the next few months, the Harmony Creek outpost became a nexus of unprecedented global collaboration. Scientists and engineers from around the world converged, working on multiple fronts. One team focused on developing advanced energy scavenging technologies, aiming to drastically reduce global energy consumption without impacting development. Another worked on a global network of dimensional stabilizers, devices based on Eris's null field generator technology, but scaled up dramatically, designed to reinforce the thin places. My daily routine was exhausting. I spent hours in the module attempting to refine our communication with HC1, relaying our progress and seeking further guidance on the nature of the warmers and the most critical points of dimensional instability. HC1's input, conveyed through increasingly sophisticated energetic patterns, was invaluable. It guided our research, pointing towards specific geological formations, particular energy frequencies, and even suggesting modifications to our proposed technologies. The entity's hum became a constant, internalized presence. It no longer felt intrusive, but rather like a deep, resonant connection. It was a silent conversation, a continuous exchange of information and intent. I felt its ancient, pervasive awareness, its profound concern for the delicate balance of existence. One evening, as I mediated a complex data transfer between HC1 and a team of theoretical physicists, the hum suddenly shifted. It deepened, becoming incredibly vast, almost overwhelming, but without the previous sense of aggression. It felt like a vast, ancient mind had opened itself entirely to me. On the holographic display, HC1 transmitted a series of patterns, unlike anything we had seen before. They weren't abstract geometries, but incredibly detailed, three-dimensional representations of what could only be described as other dimensions. Landscapes of pure energy, structures that defied Euclidean geometry, beings composed of light and shadow, utterly alien. "It's showing us its home," Eris whispered, his voice filled with awe. "Its true state of existence. It's trusting us, Alex. It's giving us a glimpse behind the veil." The experience was breathtaking, terrifying, and profoundly humbling. I saw the fragile beauty of our own dimension, suspended amidst an infinite tapestry of others. I understood on a deeper level the immense responsibility HC1 bore, and now the responsibility we were sharing. The patterns shifted again, focusing on a critical aspect of our problem, the warmers. HC1 showed us their points of origin, their chaotic energy signatures, their insatiable drive to consume. It highlighted specific locations on Earth where their manifestations were most aggressive, where the veil was thinnest and the concentration of human energetic output was highest. These were the priority zones for our new dimensional stabilizers. Days turned into a critical period. The global effort accelerated. Prototypes of the dimensional stabilizers were secretly deployed in key locations around the world, beneath major cities at points of high industrial activity, near geological fault lines that corresponded to known thin places. The design was elegant, a resonant energy field powered by clean, localized geothermal vents or advanced solar arrays designed to reinforce the dimensional fabric, creating a localized density that would deter the warmers and prevent the veil from thinning further. The deployment was a massive, covert operation, coordinated by the international agencies now working with us. It was a race against time. HC1's patterns continued to show the increasing activity of the warmers, the escalating threat of global breaches. I felt the growing tension through the hum, a palpable sense of urgency emanating from HC1. It was like a constant alarm bell ringing in my mind, urging us faster, always faster. One particularly fraught night, HC1 transmitted a series of alarm patterns. The hum was sharp, insistent, conveying immense distress. On the monitors, the global network of sensors lit up with red alerts. Multiple widespread incursions, Anya shouted, her fingers flying across her keyboard, her voice strained. Simultaneous breaches in 5 major population centers: New York, Tokyo, London, Berlin, Sao Paulo, thermal signatures of warmers confirmed. My blood ran cold. This was it, the global breach. The scenario HC1 had warned us about. Are the stabilizers online in those locations? Aris demanded, his voice tight with fear. Partially, Anya replied, her eyes glued to the screen. New York and Tokyo are at 80% deployment. London, Berlin, Sao Paulo are still ramping up at 60%. Commander Thorne barked orders into his comms, directing ground teams to activate emergency protocols to secure the partially deployed stabilizers. The situation was escalating rapidly. HC1's hum was now a desperate, frantic pulse. Its patterns on the holographic display showed a desperate struggle, a visualization of the Guardians around the world battling against the surging warmers. It was like witnessing a cosmic war being waged across multiple dimensions. I closed my eyes, focusing entirely on the hum, trying to understand, to help. I felt a surge of raw, ancient energy from HC1, a direct communication. It was telling me, urging me to amplify the stabilizers, to push. It needs us to boost the stabilizers, I yelled, opening my eyes, my voice ringing with an almost unnatural clarity. It's telling me to push maximum power to the deployed units. It's the only way to hold them back. Aris looked at me, then at Anya. Can we do that? Can we override the safety protocols and push them to 100% immediately? Anya bit her lip, her brow furrowed with concentration. It's risky. They're not fully calibrated. It could destabilize the local fields, potentially causing more damage than good, or burn out the units. The alternative is global assimilation, I countered, feeling HC1's urgency pulsating through me. It's telling us to risk it. It's our only chance. Aris hesitated for only a second, then nodded decisively. Do it, Anya. Override the safety protocols. Full power to all deployed dimensional stabilizers immediately. Anya, her face pale but determined, slammed her hand down on a sequence of keys, transmitting the command across the globe. A moment of terrifying silence. Then a collective groan from the module's power systems. Outside, the generators whined, pushed to their absolute limits. On the global sensor map, the energy signatures around New York and Tokyo suddenly flared, intensifying dramatically. The red alerts began to recede, turning amber, then green. The thermal signatures of the warmers in those cities flickered, destabilized, then vanished. New York and Tokyo are clear, Anya shouted, a gasp of relief escaping her lips. The stabilizers pushed them back. But in London, Berlin, and Sao Paulo, the red alerts persisted, though they were now flickering. The stabilizers at 60% capacity were struggling to hold them back. Push them harder, Anya, Eris roared, his voice hoarse. Whatever the risk, the alternative is unacceptable. Anya's fingers danced across the keyboard, overriding secondary fail-safes. The module hummed ominously, the strain on its power systems palpable. Outside, the generators shrieked a high-pitched protest, glowing with an internal, furious energy. On the global sensor map, the flickering red alerts in London, Berlin, and Sao Paulo suddenly intensified to a blinding crimson, then pulsed violently. The thermal signatures of the warmers, which had been struggling to maintain their forms, recoiled with an almost audible energetic snap. "They're breaking up," Anya cried out, a mix of fear and triumph in her voice. "The stabilizers are ripping them apart." Indeed, the chaotic heat signatures dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind only the faint, residual warmth of their passing. The red alerts faded to amber, then a solid green. The global threat, for now, had been averted. A collective sigh of relief, heavy and shaky, swept through the module. Aris slumped back in his chair, running a trembling hand through his hair. Anya leaned forward, forehead pressed against her console, breathing heavily. Commander Thorne, who had been gripping his rifle so tightly his knuckles were white, slowly relaxed his stance. I felt HC-1's hum, which had been a frantic, desperate pulse, slowly recede to its familiar, low thrum. It felt weary, but also relieved. The communication was clear, we had succeeded. But it had been a close call, too close. "Status report," Eris demanded, pushing himself upright. "Any collateral damage from the power surge? Any stabilizer units compromised?" Anya quickly scanned the diagnostics. Power grid fluctuations were extreme in all affected zones, but no blackouts reported. Some localized M interference, minor communication disruptions. The stabilizers themselves, their energy cores took a massive hit. They're running at critical efficiency, will need immediate maintenance and recalibration, but they're online, they held. The victory was exhilarating, but it was also a stark reminder of the immense danger we faced. This wasn't a one-time event. This was the opening salvo in a war for reality itself. "HC-1," I whispered, looking at the silent column in the field, now calmly radiating its usual cold presence. "It's telling us this is just the beginning. The warmers won't give up. They'll adapt." Eris nodded grimly. "It's right. This was a test, a probing attack, and they'll learn from it just as we learn from them. We bought ourselves time, but not a solution." The next few days were a frenzy of activity. The international coalition, now fully mobilized, moved with unprecedented speed. Engineering teams were dispatched globally to recalibrate and reinforce the stabilizers, studying the data from the overload to make them more resilient. Intelligence teams scoured every communication channel, looking for any indication of the warmers' next move. My role became even more central. I spent hours translating HC-1's subtle energetic communications, its warnings, its guidance. It highlighted new areas of concern, subtle shifts in the dimensional fabric that indicated potential future incursions. It also began to transmit more information about the warmers themselves, not just their chaotic nature, but what it perceived as their motives, their hunger. Through HC-1's patterns, we began to understand that the warmers weren't necessarily evil in a moral sense. but rather a fundamental force of entropy, of consumption. They were like a cosmic cleanup crew, drawn to pockets of excess energy and instability, to process them back into a more base state. Our highly energetic civilization, with its uncontrolled emissions and dimensional ripples, was essentially a massive, attractive food source. They're like cosmic vultures, Eris explained during one of our late-night debriefings, his eyes shadowed with fatigue, drawn to the dying or the weakened. And in a dimensional sense, humanity is creating a massive dying field around itself. The profound realization that our technological advancement, our very way of life, was what was attracting these entities, created a deep sense of unease among the global leaders. The idea of drastically curbing our energy consumption, of rethinking our entire industrial infrastructure, was a daunting, almost impossible task. But the alternative, global assimilation, was far worse. The scientific teams redoubled their efforts on clean, sustainable energy sources, on technologies that could somehow hide our energetic footprint from interdimensional detection. It was a monumental undertaking, but one that had the fate of the world riding on it. I found myself increasingly sensitive to the hum, to HC1's pervasive presence. It wasn't just a vibration in my head anymore, it was a constant internal dialogue. I felt its ancient watchfulness, its deep-seated concern, but also a strange, alien patience. It had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, countless dimensions ebb and flow. It understood the long game. One evening, as the moon cast long shadows across the Harmony Creek field, I stood outside the module, braving the pervasive chill of HC1's presence. The security perimeter was heightened, the silence of the night punctuated by the distant hum of generators and the soft whir of patrolling drones. I closed my eyes, focusing on the hum. This time, it wasn't a warning or a request for information. It was something else. A subtle, almost melodic vibration, a sequence of feeling concepts that flowed directly into my mind. It wasn't words, but a profound understanding of a landscape, a place beyond our reality. I saw, or rather felt, a vast, shimmering expanse. It was not empty space, but a sea of pure, coherent energy, a tapestry of interwoven dimensions. And at the heart of this tapestry, a single point of profound, ancient stability, a nexus where all realities converged. It was the source, the heart of the collective consciousness that HC1 was a part of. And then, a new set of feeling concepts. HC1 was showing me a pathway, not a physical path, but a conceptual one, a way to understand, to perhaps even access this nexus of stability. It was an invitation, a profound risk, but potentially the only way to truly understand the root cause of the dimensional thinning and the warmer's incursions. I opened my eyes, a gasp escaping my lips. The cold air felt sharp against my skin. I hurried back into the module where Eris and Anya were poring over some new data streams. HC1 just communicated something profound, I announced, my voice trembling with the enormity of what I had experienced. It showed me the source, the heart of its collective, and it's inviting us to understand. Eris looked up, his eyes wide with scientific hunger. The source, the origin of the collective consciousness. What do you mean, Alex? I tried to articulate the non-verbal communication, the feeling concepts. It's not a place, not a location we can travel to physically. It's a conceptual nexus, a point of ultimate stability in the dimensional fabric. And HC1 is showing us a way to conceptually connect with it, to understand its perspective, its purpose. Anya, always pragmatic, frowned. conceptually connect how and what would be the risk, this entity has shown its power. A direct mental link with its source could be catastrophic. It's a shared consciousness, not a single mind, Eris countered, already processing the implications. HC1 is an anchor, a focal point. What if it's proposing a deeper form of communication, a direct interface with its collective knowledge? It could be the key to understanding how to repair the dimensional fabric, how to truly repel the warmers. The idea was audacious, terrifying, and profoundly tempting. It was the ultimate scientific frontier. Over the next few days, we meticulously discussed and debated the implications of HC1's invitation. The risks were immense. An interdimensional entity's collective consciousness could overwhelm human minds, could shatter our perception of reality. But the potential rewards, a complete understanding of the dimensional fabric, a permanent solution to the warmers, were too great to ignore. Eris, with his unshakable scientific curiosity, began to formulate a plan. It wouldn't be a direct, unprotected mental link. We would need a conduit, a buffer, a way to filter and interpret the information. We need to build a new interface, Eris proposed. One that can translate these feeling concepts into a comprehensible format. Something that can protect a human consciousness while allowing it to interact with the sheer scale of HC1's collective. He envisioned a highly advanced neurointerface, combined with the holographic display technology Anya had developed for HC1's patterns. This device, dubbed the Nexus Conduit, would allow a human mind to enter a controlled, simulated environment where HC1's collective consciousness could be safely experienced and interpreted. And who would be the one to use it? Commander Thorne asked, his gaze fixed on me. The question hung heavy in the air. I knew the answer before he even finished. My sensitivity to the hum, my established connection with HC1, made me the obvious, albeit terrifying, choice. Me, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I'm the only one who can truly interface with it. Eris nodded, his expression a mixture of profound concern and grim determination. It has to be Alex. Her unique resonance, her intuitive connection, it's critical. The construction of the Nexus Conduit became the new priority. Engineers and neurophysicists from around the world were brought in, working in shifts around the clock. The device was intricate, a fusion of biofeedback systems, quantum entanglement processors, and advanced holographic projections. It was designed to create a bridge between the abstract, energetic reality of HC1's collective and the structured, logical processing of the human brain. Weeks blurred into a dizzying cycle of design, construction, and testing. My training began not just with the Nexus Conduit itself, but with intense psychological preparation. I underwent simulations designed to desensitize me to overwhelming sensory input, to help me maintain mental clarity under extreme duress. I practiced focusing my mind, filtering out noise, and anchoring myself to my own reality. HC1's hum was my constant companion, guiding the design of the conduit, subtly influencing the frequencies and resonant patterns that would be most effective. It was an active participant in its own interface. Finally, the day came. The Nexus Conduit stood in the center of the main module, a sleek, gleaming marvel of technology. It was an intricate array of transparent screens, shimmering lights, and soft, glowing pads where I would rest my hands. A specially designed neurohelmet would connect directly to my neural pathways, translating my thoughts and perceptions into data that the conduit could process. The atmosphere in the module was electric with anticipation and dread. Eris, Anya, and Commander Thorn stood by, their faces etched with concern. The entire Harmony Creek outpost was on high alert, with security teams standing by, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. I took a deep breath, the hum of HC1 now a steady, calming presence in my mind. I sat in the central chair, placing my hands on the glowing pads. The neuro helmet was gently placed on my head, cool and surprisingly light. "Alex, can you hear me?" Eris's voice was calm, reassuring, coming through a small comms unit in the helmet. "Clearly," I replied, my own voice a little shaky. "Remember your training," Anya chimed in. "Maintain focus. Don't let yourself be overwhelmed. You can disconnect at any time simply by willing it." I nodded even though they couldn't see it. I closed my eyes, taking another steadying breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "Activating Nexus Conduit," Eris announced. A low thrum, separate from HC1's hum, emanated from the conduit. The transparent screens around me began to glow, filling the space with soft, shifting light. Then HC1's hum intensified, but not aggressively. It was an embrace, a gentle, yet immense, opening. I felt a subtle tug, a sense of my consciousness expanding, reaching out beyond the confines of my body. The holographic screens around me flared, no longer displaying abstract patterns, but a vivid, impossible landscape. It was the shimmering expanse I had felt before, a sea of coherent energy, a kaleidoscope of impossible colors and forms that defied earthly physics. It was the collective consciousness. It wasn't a cacophony of voices, but a single, pervasive awareness, a deep, ancient understanding that flowed into my mind. I felt the immense weight of millennia, the countless cycles of dimensions, the delicate balance of existence. I was aware of HC1 as a point within this vast sea, an anchor. And then I perceived other anchors spread across the tapestry, each one a guardian, a sentinel. They were all connected, all part of the same consciousness, observing, maintaining, protecting. The information flowed into me not as data points, but as profound, intuitive understanding. I saw the true nature of the tiers. They weren't just breaches, but necessary pressure valves, points where raw cosmic energy could filter into our dimension, maintaining a subtle energetic exchange. The problem wasn't the tiers themselves, but the disruption of their natural function. Humanity, with its rapid technological growth, had inadvertently amplified these energetic exchanges, transforming the pressure valves into gaping wounds. Our uncontrolled energy emissions, our reckless manipulation of natural resources, our very thoughts and emotions, all created ripples in the dimensional fabric, drawing the warmers like moths to a flame. The warmers, I saw them too. They weren't creatures of malice, but of pure instinct. They were nature's immune system, drawn to any imbalance, any excess. They consumed, assimilated, and recycled energetic waste, returning it to a primal state. The assimilation of the Miller boy of the livestock, it wasn't an act of aggression, but of automatic, instinctual cleanup. A catastrophic accident from our perspective, a natural process from theirs. The sheer scale of this understanding was overwhelming. My mind reeled. I felt the immense, ancient sorrow of the collective consciousness, not for us, but for the fundamental imbalance we were creating. It wasn't hatred, but a profound, detached regret. Then, a new layer of information. The collective consciousness wasn't just observing, it was actively trying to teach. It showed me solutions, concepts that were utterly alien to human physics, yet felt inherently right. It showed me how to harmonize our dimension with the others, how to repair the frayed edges of reality. It wasn't about simply reducing our energy footprint. It was about recalibrating it, about developing technologies that resonated with the natural frequencies of the dimensional fabric that could generate energy without creating destructive ripples. It was about creating a symbiotic relationship, not just with our planet, but with the very cosmos. The concept was beautiful, elegant, and almost impossible for human minds to fully grasp, but I felt it. I understood the underlying principles. It was about balance, about resonance, about respecting the fundamental laws of interdimensional physics. I saw visions of a future Earth, not of primitive stasis, but of advanced technology seamlessly integrated with cosmic harmony. Cities glowing with soft, resonant energy, vehicles gliding on silent gravimetric fields, industries that recycled matter and energy in perfect symphony with nature. It was a utopia born of necessity, guided by alien wisdom. My mind was a conduit downloading millennia of knowledge, a blueprint for cosmic sustainability. I felt the immense pressure of this information, the profound weight of responsibility. I was holding the fate of two realities in my mind. "Alex, are you all right? Your vital signs are fluctuating." Eris's voice cut through the immersive experience, a lifeline to my own reality. I focused, pulling myself back slightly from the overwhelming flow of information. The holographic landscape shimmered but didn't disappear. I'm fine. It's incredible. I understand. I see the solutions." I began to articulate, slowly at first, then with growing clarity, the complex concepts I was receiving. I described the need for resonant energy generators, devices that could tap into the underlying dimensional frequencies without causing disruption. I spoke of active dimensional harmonizers, not just passive stabilizers that could dynamically adjust to local energy fluctuations, mending the tears from the inside out. Anya frantically typed, transcribing my verbalized thoughts, projecting them onto a separate screen. Eris, his face pale with awe, listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions about specific energetic principles or theoretical applications. "It's showing us how to create energy that doesn't bleed into other dimensions," I explained, my voice filled with a strange, otherworldly confidence. "How to build technology that integrates with the dimensional fabric rather than tearing it apart. It's about resonance, not raw output." The session with the Nexus conduit lasted for hours. I was a bridge between two realities, translating abstract concepts into scientific principles, bringing alien wisdom into human understanding. By the time I finally disengaged, my mind was buzzing, my body exhausted, but my spirit felt profoundly changed. I was no longer just Alex, the environmental consultant. I was something more. A vessel, a messenger, a vital link in an interdimensional alliance. The data I had brought back from the Nexus conduit revolutionized our understanding. Eris immediately mobilized his global teams, redirecting research efforts, pouring resources into these new, radically different approaches to energy generation and dimensional technology. The concept of resonance technology became the new mantra. Instead of brute force energy production, we would focus on elegant, harmonized systems. Prototypes were rapidly developed, drawing on HC1's specific guidance conveyed through my interface sessions. The first breakthrough came with a small-scale resonance generator. It was a device that, instead of burning fossil fuels or splitting atoms, gently vibrated at a specific, subtle frequency, drawing minute amounts of energy directly from the ambient dimensional fabric without causing any ripple or disruption. It was clean, efficient, and completely invisible to the warmers. The implications were staggering. Imagine a world powered not by destructive forces, but by the subtle, ever-present energy of the universe itself. The global agencies, initially skeptical of such radical concepts, were convinced by the tangible results. When a resonance generator prototype was tested in a known thin place that previously attracted warmers, the entity activity in that area plummeted to zero. The veil, instead of thinning, subtly strengthened, sealing itself. This was the solution. But the scale of the challenge remained immense. Replacing the entire global energy infrastructure, implementing these resonance technologies worldwide would take decades, if not centuries, and the warmers weren't going to wait. Their activity continued to escalate, their incursions becoming more frequent, more aggressive. HC1's communication grew more urgent. It indicated that while resonance technology was the long-term solution, we needed an immediate, short-term measure to buy us more time. Through the Nexus conduit, HC1 unveiled a new, radical concept, a global dimensional harmonizer. It wasn't just a network of localized stabilizers. It was a single, massive, interlinked superstructure, powered by the collective output of the deployed resonance generators, designed to create a global density in the dimensional fabric, a shield. This harmonizer would operate as a vast, resonant field, enveloping the entire planet, effectively making Earth invisible to the warmers, while also actively repairing the dimensional damage already inflicted. It would be a monumental undertaking, requiring the coordination of every nation on Earth and an unprecedented amount of resources. The proposed design for the global dimensional harmonizer was breathtaking in its complexity and elegance. It involved a network of thousands of smaller resonance emitters, strategically placed in space and across the Earth's surface, all synced to a central nexus point. This nexus point, HC1 suggested, would be located at Harmony Creek, at the heart of anomaly site HC1 itself. "It wants us to build it here," Eris asked, his voice hushed as I explained the concept. "At its point of manifestation, it wants to become the anchor for a planetary shield." "It is an anchor, Eris," I clarified. "It's showing us that it can act as the central processing unit, the focal point for this global field. It will lend its inherent dimensional stability to the harmonizer, becoming a part of the solution it oversees." The proposal was met with a mix of awe and trepidation by the International Committee. It meant essentially building a superstructure around an alien entity, allowing it to interface directly with a planetary defense system. It required an immense leap of faith. But the alternative was continued incursions, global chaos, and eventual assimilation. The choice, once again, was stark. The project, codenamed Project Harmony, began. Harmony Creek transformed from a remote research outpost into a bustling, high-security construction site. Specialized teams from every major power converged, working under Eris's meticulous direction and HC1's subtle guidance through my Nexus conduit sessions. Massive energy collectors, powered by early resonance generators, were installed around the field, carefully avoiding any direct intrusion on HC1's manifestation zone. These collectors would feed the global dimensional harmonizer, converting raw dimensional energy into the precise resonant frequencies needed for the planetary shield. The core of the harmonizer was a massive, crystalline structure designed to amplify and distribute the resonant frequencies across the globe. It was a wonder of engineering, a fusion of human technology and alien principles, shimmering with an internal ethereal light, and it was positioned directly over anomaly site HC1, allowing HC1's energy signature to seamlessly integrate with its design. My role was relentless. I spent increasingly long hours in the Nexus conduit, mediating between the human engineers and the abstract directives of HC1. I became adept at translating its complex energetic patterns into actionable blueprints, fine-tuning the crystalline structure, guiding the placement of the resonance emitters across the globe. The hum was now a constant, almost comforting presence, an extension of my own awareness. I felt HC1's immense focus, its singular purpose. It was preparing for the ultimate integration, the ultimate act of guardianship. As Project Harmony neared completion, the Warmers launched their most coordinated and aggressive attack yet. It wasn't a few isolated breaches, it was a global assault, a wave of chaotic energy signatures appearing simultaneously in dozens of locations around the world. "They're attempting a full-spectrum breach," Anya shouted, her voice strained. "They know we're building something. They're trying to overwhelm us before the harmonizer comes online." The global sensor map was a sea of red. The existing localized stabilizers, even after their upgrades, were flickering, struggling against the sheer number and intensity of the incursions. Cities around the world reported localized energy surges, inexplicable disappearances, and the terrifying, flickering heat signatures of the Warmers. "Activate the harmonizer," Eris roared, his face grim, his eyes fixed on the chaotic map. "Bring it online now." But the harmonizer wasn't fully calibrated. The core crystal needed a final, precise energetic charge, a specific frequency to truly lock in with HC1's signature and resonate across the planet. "We're not ready," Anya cried out, her fingers flying across her console. "The final calibration sequence is still running. It could destabilize if we rush it." The hum from HC1 intensified dramatically, but it wasn't a warning of danger to us. It was a pulse of immense, focused intent. It was communicating directly with me, bypassing the conduit, flowing straight into my mind. It showed me the final sequence, the exact frequency, the precise moment. It was a resonant frequency that would not just activate the harmonizer, but would also pull in the collective consciousness of HC1, integrating it fully with the planetary defense system. "I know the frequency," I yelled, pushing myself to the Nexus conduit. "HC1 is showing me I can do it." Eris looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate hope. "Are you sure, Alex? Are you absolutely sure?" "Yes," I shouted, strapping the neurohelmet on, ignoring the frantic protests from Anya about safety protocols. "It's the only way. I can provide the direct interface, the final energetic lock." My hands flew to the glowing pads of the Nexus conduit. I closed my eyes, focusing all my will, all my intuitive connection with HC1 on the task. The hum filled my mind, vast and powerful. On the holographic display, the core crystal of the harmonizer, still inert, began to glow faintly. I felt HC1's entire being focus on me, on the conduit. It was pouring its essence, its ancient knowledge, its stabilizing force into our connection. I was no longer just a translator. I was a living conduit, a bridge between its consciousness and our technology. I visualized the frequency, the intricate resonance pattern. I pushed my own consciousness, guided by HC1, into the harmonizer. I felt the surge of raw energy from the collectors, the hum of the core crystal. And then I pushed. A wave of pure, coherent energy erupted from the Nexus conduit, flowing into the nascent harmonizer. The core crystal flared with an incandescent golden light, pulsing in perfect synchronization with the hum in my mind. On the global sensor map, the red alerts began to flicker, not just in isolated pockets, but across the entire planet. The thermal signatures of the warmers, caught in the sudden, overwhelming resonant field, began to distort, to fragment, to dissipate. "It's working," Anya shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "The harmonizer is online. It's pushing them back globally." The golden light from the core crystal swelled, expanding outwards, not just within the harmonizer, but across the entire Harmony Creek field. It enveloped Anomaly Site HC1, the silent column of darkness. And then something truly extraordinary happened. The shadow HC1 began to shimmer, not with distortion or distress, but with an internal radiant light. Its blue-black thermal signature softened, becoming translucent. The column seemed to expand, to thin, to dissolve into pure golden light, coalescing with the energy of the harmonizer's core. It wasn't disappearing, it was integrating, becoming one with the planetary shield. Its form, as we knew it, was dissolving, becoming a pervasive planetary presence. I felt it in my mind, the final, profound communication from HC1, a feeling of immense completion, of purpose fulfilled. Its guardianship was no longer localized, it was planetary. Its consciousness was no longer confined to the field, it was distributed, interwoven with the dimensional fabric of Earth itself. Then a final, poignant surge of feeling concepts. Gratitude, hope, and a silent plea: maintain the balance, protect the harmony. The golden light of the core crystal pulsed once more, then settled into a steady, soft glow. The hum in my mind, while still present, transformed. It was no longer an external presence, but an internal resonance, a deep, pervasive connection to the newly harmonized Earth. I opened my eyes, the neurohelmet feeling heavy on my head. I looked at the global sensor map. All red alerts were gone. The planet was bathed in a soft, ethereal green, signifying total dimensional stability. The warmers were gone, pushed back, sealed out, rendered harmless by the planetary shield. I slowly removed the helmet, my body feeling lighter, clearer than it ever had before. I looked at Eris, Anya, Commander Thorn. Their faces were awash with a mixture of awe, exhaustion, and triumph. "It's done," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "The harmonizer is online, the warmers are gone, HC1, it's everywhere now." Eris walked towards me, his face etched with a profound reverence. You did it, Alex. You saved us. You became the bridge. The Harmony Creek outpost, the site of so much fear and discovery, now stood as a monument to an unprecedented alliance. The core crystal of the harmonizer pulsed gently, bathing the field in its golden light, a silent testament to the guardian that now protected our world. But the work was not over. This was a shield, a temporary measure. We still needed to implement resonance technology globally to truly recalibrate humanity's energetic footprint to prevent future imbalances that might overwhelm even the harmonizer. The planet was safe for now, but the responsibility was ours to maintain that safety, to learn from HC1's wisdom, and to build a future in harmony with the cosmos. Weeks turned into months, and the world slowly began to heal. The global dimensional harmonizer, now simply known as the Harmony Grid, became a silent, omnipresent protector. The subtle hum I now felt was not just my connection to HC1, but my connection to the entire Earth, a constant reminder of the delicate balance we now maintained. The international collaboration continued, focused on the global rollout of resonance technology. Factories were retooled, power grids redesigned, entire cities reimagined. It was a slow, arduous process, fraught with political and economic challenges, but the memory of the global breach, the terrifying threat of the warmers, fueled an unprecedented unity among nations. My role evolved once more. I became the principal ambassador for the Harmony Grid, traveling the world, explaining the subtle nuances of interdimensional physics to skeptical politicians, inspiring scientists with the vision of a harmonized future, and most importantly, teaching people to listen to the new, subtle hum of the planet. Eris became the chief architect of the new energy paradigm, spearheading the global conversion to resonance technology. Anya, a brilliant analyst, developed advanced monitoring systems to constantly assess the Harmony Grid's integrity and to predict potential dimensional stress points. Commander Thorne, ever the pragmatist, now oversaw the security of the resonance technology installations, ensuring their protection from any lingering, opportunistic threats. The Harmony Creek site, with its glowing core crystal, became a pilgrimage site for scientists and spiritual leaders alike. It was a place where the veil between worlds had been lifted, where humanity had faced its greatest challenge and found an unlikely ally. The solar farm, the initial impetus for all this, was now merely a footnote, replaced by the profound significance of the harmonizer. One day, Eris called me back to Harmony Creek. The core crystal pulsed with a gentle, consistent golden light. The hum in my mind was steady, peaceful. "We've been monitoring some new energy signatures," Eris said, his voice quiet, his eyes fixed on the core crystal. "Not warmers, not chaotic, they're coherent, almost like a response." My heart quickened. A response from what? He led me to the main module where Anya was already at her console, projecting new patterns onto the holographic display. These weren't the complex instructional patterns from HC1. These were different. They were incredibly intricate, beautiful, like geometric mandalas of pure light slowly unfolding. "These are coming from beyond the Harmony Grid," Anya explained, her voice filled with wonder. "From deeper into the dimensional tapestry. The grid, by creating such a powerful, resonant field around Earth, it's attracting attention." I felt the hum intensify, not aggressively, but with curiosity, with anticipation. HC1, or rather, the collective consciousness now interwoven with the Harmony Grid, was perceiving these new signals, and it was sharing its perception with me. These new entities or intelligences were not like the warmers. They were not chaotic. They were not destructive. They were observers, drawn by the sudden, profound shift in Earth's dimensional signature, drawn by the harmony we had created. Eris looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a familiar scientific hunger, but tempered now with a deeper wisdom. Alex, it seems we have not only saved our world, but we have also announced our presence to a larger interdimensional community. The Harmony Grid is not just a shield, it's a beacon. The implications were staggering once more. Our struggle for survival had inadvertently elevated us onto a galactic, or rather interdimensional stage. We were no longer isolated. The cosmic tapestry was vast, and we had just made ourselves visible to its countless threads. "What do they want?" I whispered, feeling the distant, curious hum of these new presences. Eris smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile that I hadn't seen in a long time. "That, Alex, is the next great mystery, the next stage of our journey. We saved our home, but now we get to explore the neighborhood." The hum in my mind resonated with his words, a sense of boundless possibility unfolding. The future was no longer defined by fear and survival, but by discovery and connection. The silent guardian had become a global protector and now a cosmic guide. The challenge now was to understand these new signals, to learn their language, to discern their intentions. Were they benevolent, indifferent, or were they just as diverse and complex as the myriad forms of life in our own universe? HC1, through the Harmony Grid, was observing them, processing their patterns, and slowly, gently began to offer its insights. This new phase required even more delicate handling. HC1 cautioned against any direct, uncontrolled interaction. It emphasized patience, observation, and the continued strengthening of our own internal harmony. It was a universal principle: harmony within, harmony without. My Nexus conduit sessions became less about decoding warnings and more about interpreting subtle nuances of interdimensional communication. We developed new algorithms, new methods of visualizing these complex patterns. The holographic display in the module became a window into an unfolding cosmic dialogue. One particularly clear night, as the Harmony Grid pulsed its golden light around the Earth, HC1 transmitted a series of images through the Nexus conduit. They were not abstract, but pictorial representations of celestial bodies. Vast nebulae and shimmering galaxies, all interwoven with patterns of pure energy. But these weren't just astronomical observations. Each image carried with it a profound sense of presence, a unique energetic signature, a distinct form of consciousness. "These are other civilizations," I whispered, my breath catching in my throat. "HC1 is showing us where these new signals are coming from. It's showing us who's out there." Anya's fingers danced over her console, zooming in on one of the projected images, a gas giant with rings made of what looked like solidified light, orbited by dozens of crystalline moons. On the surface of one of these moons, delicate, filigree structures pulsed with an inner luminescence. The data patterns accompanying these images are incredibly complex, Anya murmured, her eyes wide with scientific excitement. "They're not just coordinates, they're cultural markers, scientific principles, philosophies almost." Eris, ever the pragmatist, leaned closer to the display. And HC1's assessment: are these entities a threat? Are they like the warmers or something entirely different? I closed my eyes, focusing on the hum. HC1's response was a nuanced flow of feeling concepts, not a threat, not hostile, but different. Each civilization had its own unique way of interacting with the dimensional fabric, its own energetic footprint. Some were ancient and profoundly harmonized, almost ethereal. Others were young and vibrant, full of nascent potential, but still grappling with their own energetic impact. They are observers, I translated, opening my eyes. Like us, they exist within the cosmic tapestry. The harmony grid is a profound event for them. It's like a new star suddenly appeared in their sky, a beacon of order, of intentional harmony in a sea of potential chaos. The module buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose. The immediate threat of the warmers had been managed, but now a far grander, more complex challenge lay before us: understanding our place in an interdimensional cosmos. Over the next few months, Project Harmony shifted its focus. While the global rollout of resonance technology continued and the Harmony Grid maintained its silent vigil, a new division was formed: Xeno-Interdimensional Relations, or XIR. Its primary goal was to decipher the incoming signals, to understand the intent of these new cosmic neighbors, and to prepare for potential communication. My role as the most sensitive conduit to HC1's pervasive consciousness became paramount. I spent hours daily in the Nexus conduit, mediating between the raw, complex energetic patterns from these new entities and the burgeoning human understanding. HC1, now interwoven with the Harmony Grid, acted as a global interpreter, filtering and contextualizing the torrent of incoming information. The Nexus conduit became a window into the broader universe. I saw worlds powered by living crystals, societies built on shared consciousness, beings that communicated through light and sound entirely without spoken language. Each new signal was a revelation, expanding our understanding of what life and intelligence could be. One particular set of signals began to dominate the incoming data. They originated from a binary star system, far beyond our immediate galactic neighborhood, but connected through a series of subtle dimensional pathways that the Harmony Grid now made visible. The patterns were intricate, elegant, and unlike any others we had encountered. They conveyed a profound sense of ancient wisdom, of a civilization that had mastered interdimensional harmony eons ago. HC1 identified them as the Lumines. Through the Nexus conduit, the Lumines communicated in a way that resonated deeply with HC1's own principles. They expressed curiosity, then admiration, for humanity's rapid development of the Harmony Grid. They perceived it as a remarkable achievement for a relatively young, previously chaotic species. The Lumines began to transmit more targeted data streams, focusing on advanced concepts of dimensional mechanics, energy resonance, and even theoretical methods for conscious interdimensional travel. It was clear they were offering guidance, a mentorship of sorts, to a species that had just taken its first tentative steps onto the cosmic stage.